He grabbed her face with both hands, grease-stained, trembling, and said it out loud before his brain could stop him. "Kiss me for luck." Emily Carter froze. The whole street went quiet. And then she smiled. Not the nervous, apologetic smile she usually wore like armor. A real one. Slow, warm. And she whispered back, "How much more do you need?" Nobody on Calloway Street knew it yet, but that one reckless, half-joking moment between a broken single dad and the neighbor. Everyone underestimated. Would start a war, a healing, and a love story nobody saw coming. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. You don't want to miss what happens next. The alarm didn't wake Marcus Bennett on the morning of September 14th. He was already awake. Had been since 3 a.m., sitting at the kitchen table in the dark, staring at a manila envelope he'd read so many times. The crease down the middle was starting to split. Inside was a job listing for senior project manager at Caldwell & Reed Construction, a firm so far above where Marcus currently stood that applying felt less like ambition and more like delusion. But his daughter's school fees were past due. His mortgage was 42 days in arrears, and the $847 in his checking account had to last another 3 weeks. So delusion was all he had. He'd printed the job listing on a Tuesday, stayed up 2 nights editing his resume, had his sister Denise review his cover letter 4 times over the phone. And now on a Thursday morning that smelled like burnt coffee and anxiety, Marcus Bennett was sitting in a button-down shirt he'd ironed twice, dress pants he hadn't worn since his wife's funeral, and shoes that were just a little too tight because he couldn't afford new ones, and he refused to show up to that office in boots. He looked down at the envelope again. Senior Project Manager. Salary commensurate with experience. Preference given to candidates with PMP certification. He didn't have the certification. He'd been working toward it before Rachel got sick, and then everything just stopped. The studying, the planning, the future. All of it stopped the morning she was diagnosed and started running in a different direction that none of them had chosen. Marcus pressed the heels of both hands against his eyes. Howe was 37 years old. He had an 8-year-old daughter named Lily, who still sometimes called for her mother in her sleep. He had a truck that burned oil, a roof that leaked when it rained hard, and a job at Dominguez Construction that paid $18 an hour, and had just told him politely and in writing that his contract would not be renewed after October 1st. 17 days away. He exhaled slowly, stood up, and went to check on Lily. Her room was the one place in the house that still looked the way it was supposed to. Rachel had painted it herself when Lily was 2. Soft yellow walls, little white stars stenciled near the ceiling, a bookshelf shaped like a castle. Marcus had repainted it last spring, matching the exact shade from the original paint can Rachel had saved in the garage, labeled in her handwriting, Lily's Sunshine. He stood in the doorway. Lily was asleep on her side, one arm wrapped around a stuffed elephant named Gerald Hare, fanned out across the pillow. She looked so much like Rachel sometimes that it physically hurt. That specific ache behind the sternum that never fully went away, just moved in deeper and quieter with time. "Okay," he whispered to nobody in particular. Maybe to himself. Maybe to Rachel wherever she was. "Okay, I'm going." Howe was in the driveway at 7:15, dressed and ready, except the truck wouldn't start. It turned over twice, coughed like a sick dog, and died. Marcus sat behind the wheel for exactly 4 seconds. Then he got out, went around to the front, opened the hood, and stood there staring at the engine, the way a man stares at a problem he recognizes but doesn't know how to solve at 7 in the morning in dress pants. "Come on," he muttered. Not today, man." He checked the battery connections, jiggled the cables, checked again. Tried to think through what his father used to tell him about engines when he was a teenager, about coaxing them the way you'd coax a nervous horse with patience and pressure in the right places. He was elbow deep in the engine compartment dress shirt, already showing a gray smear along the cuff when he heard the screen door from next door. He didn't look up. He already knew who it was. Emily Carter had lived next door for just over 2 years. She'd moved in quietly, the way a person moves when they're trying not to be noticed. One truck, no movers. most of the boxes carried by herself. Marcus had helped her with her couch because it was the decent thing to do, and she'd thanked him so many times it almost made him uncomfortable. After that, they exchanged the usual neighbor pleasantries, waves across the driveway, the occasional good morning, a borrowed cup of something when one of them ran short. But something had shifted over the past few months. It started the evening Lily had a meltdown at the school pickup because she'd left her favorite library book at school and was convinced it would be gone in the morning, and Emily, who happened to be pulling into her driveway at the same moment, had simply crouched down to Lily's level and said, "You know what, I bet that book is going to be the first thing you see tomorrow. Books like to wait for the people who love them most." Lily had stopped crying almost immediately. Marcus had noticed. Since then, things had just grown. Slowly, naturally, without either of them naming it or pushing it. Emily brought extra soup over when Lily had a cold. Marcus fixed the hinge on Emily's back gate that had been dragging for 6 months. They sat on their respective porches some evenings and talked across the small strip of yard that divided their properties, and Marcus had started to realize somewhere around late July that those conversations had become the best part of his days. He'd told himself it was just friendship. He'd told himself that more than once. Now he heard her footsteps on the gravel and kept his head down because he was embarrassed. Embarrassed by the truck, by the interview, by the grease already working its way under his nails, the way it always did. "Trouble?" Emily asked. "Little bit," he said. A pause. "What kind?" "The this thing won't start, and I have an interview in 45 minutes kind." He heard her take a few steps closer. Not hovering, just present. That was something he'd noticed about Emily. She never hovered. She came close enough to help and left enough space that you didn't feel crowded. "Where's the interview?" "Downtown, Caldwell and Reed." Another pause. Then, "That's a good firm." "I know." He tried the cables again, pressing and twisting. Hence the panic. "Is it the battery or something else? I'm hoping it's the connection. If it's the alternator, I'm cooked." He tried the ignition again. Nothing. Marcus stood up, pressed his palms flat on top of the hood, and took a breath. 7 years, he said to the truck, more than to Emily. 7 years, and you picked today. "I have a car," Emily said. He looked at her for the first time. She was standing at the edge of her driveway wearing a blue cardigan and jeans, holding a travel mug in both hands. Her dark hair was pulled back. She was looking at him with an expression that wasn't pity, he'd learned to recognize pity, but something more practical, like a person assessing a logistics problem. "I can't ask you to." "You didn't ask. I offered." She tilted her head slightly. "But I need to know. Is there time to change your shirt?" He looked down at the cuff, the grease. 20 minutes, he said. "Then go." She pulled her keys from her cardigan pocket. "I'll warm up the car." He stood there for half a second, and then something loosened in his chest, that particular tightening that happened when he'd been holding everything together alone for too long, and somebody just quietly offered to share the weight. "Emily, go change Marcus." He went. I was back in 4 minutes. Different shirt tie, slightly crooked hair brushed. Emily was in the driver's seat. He got in, and she pulled out of the driveway before he'd fully closed the door. They didn't talk much at first. She drove with both hands on the wheel, easy and calm. The radio was off. Outside, the neighborhood was going through its morning routine, sprinklers running a school bus, stopping 2 blocks over a man in a robe collecting his newspaper. "You know," Marcus said, straightening his tie in the visor mirror. "I've been up since 3. "I know." He looked at her. "How?" "I heard your kitchen light come on." She glanced at him briefly. "My bedroom window faces your kitchen. You had the overhead light on, not the lamp, the overhead. That's the one you use when you're up and worried. The lamp's for when you can't sleep but you're okay." He stared at her. She kept driving, expression unchanged. "That is," he started. "Strange, probably. I was going to say oddly specific." She almost smiled. "I pay attention." He faced forward again. Something about those 3 words landed somewhere important. "I pay attention." Nobody in his life, not his sister, Not his buddies from the job site. Not the various well-meaning neighbors who'd brought casseroles in the weeks after Rachel died had ever said anything that simple and meant that much. "The job," she said. "What's the position?" he told her. She asked the right questions, not softball flattery, but real questions. What did the role actually require? What was his strongest qualification? What was he most worried they'd ask? By the time they hit the freeway, he'd talked himself through the whole interview twice, and something had shifted in his posture. He was sitting straighter, not out of performance, but because talking it through out loud had reminded him that he knew more than he sometimes gave himself credit for. "You're going to do well," Emily said as she took the downtown exit. "You don't know that." "No," she agreed. "But I know that you've been doing an impossible job for 3 years without help, and you've kept your daughter healthy and happy and reading above grade level, which means you know how to manage complexity under pressure." She glanced at him. "That's literally the job description." Marcus opened his mouth, closed it. "Just answer their questions the way you answered mine," she said. "You're not performing, you're explaining. There's a difference." He sat with that for a moment. "When did you get so smart?" She raised an eyebrow. "I was going to say helpful." "I've always been helpful," she said lightly. "You just weren't paying attention." She pulled up to the curb in front of the Caldwell and Reed building, a 12-story glass and steel tower that looked the way authority always looked, designed to make people feel small before they even walked through the door. Marcus sat still for a moment. The tie still wasn't quite right. Emily reached over without asking and straightened it. 2 small adjustments, quick and precise. And then her hands were back in her lap, and she was looking forward again as if nothing had happened. But Marcus felt it. That small, ordinary gesture that shouldn't have meant anything and meant everything. He turned to look at her profile. "Emily." "Yes." I didn't know exactly what impulse moved through him in that moment. The leftover adrenaline, the gratitude, the 3 weeks of financial terror compressed into a single morning, or maybe just the fact that she had straightened his tie like it was the most natural thing in the world. But he heard himself say it before he could think it through. "Kiss me for luck." The words landed in the car like a stone in still water. Emily turned to look at him. A beat. 2. And then slowly she smiled. Not the polite, managed smile he usually saw. Something deeper, warmer, like a door opening that had been closed for a very long time. "How much more do you need?" He stared at her. She held his gaze, not flinching, not looking away, just steady and warm and slightly amused. And something else underneath that he couldn't name yet, but recognized in his chest like a chord he hadn't heard in years. The moment stretched. A cab honked somewhere behind them. A city bus groaned past. The ordinary world kept moving. Marcus laughed. It came out of him all at once, genuine surprise, the best laugh he'd had in longer than he could remember. Not polite laughter, not the kind he performed for Lily's sake to make things feel normal. Real laughter. "I'll save you some for when you get back," Emily said, and her voice had gone just slightly softer, like she was aware that something had shifted and wasn't in a rush to identify it. "Yeah," he said. "Go," she said. "You're 2 minutes early. Don't waste it sitting here." He got out of the car. I was halfway to the door when he turned back. Emily was still there, watching through the windshield, not obviously, not with that intense longing stare that belonged in movies. Just watching. The way you watch someone you care about walk towards something hard, hoping they're going to be okay. He lifted one hand. She lifted one back. And Marcus Bennett walked into Caldwell and Reed feeling for the first time in a long time like a man who might actually deserve something good. The interview lasted an hour and 40 minutes. He met with 2 people, a project director named Howard Kimball, who wore a blazer and no tie, and had the efficient, focused energy of someone who asked questions because he actually wanted to know the answers. And a woman named Sandra Park, who ran HR and took notes the entire time in a small green notebook with a pen she kept clicking. They asked him about his experience, his process, how he'd handled a job site conflict, what he did when a project went over budget, what his relationship was like with subcontractors, with city inspectors, with clients who changed their minds halfway through. He answered the way Emily had told him to, not performing, explaining. At one point, Howard Kimball leaned back in his chair and said, "You don't have the PMP certification." "Not yet," Marcus said. "I started the program in 2021. My wife was diagnosed with cancer that fall. I put it on hold. I plan to complete it." There was a silence. "I'm sorry," Howard said. "About your wife." "Thank you." Marcus kept his voice even. "She was a remarkable person." "How long has she been gone?" 3 years. Howard nodded slowly. Then he looked at Sandra, and something passed between them that Marcus couldn't read. "We're interviewing 4 other candidates," Howard said. "We'll be in touch by end of next week." "I appreciate your time," Marcus said, and shook both their hands and walked out. He sat in the lobby for a moment after. The building's front atrium had marble floors and a fountain and the kind of air conditioning that made you feel like you'd entered a different climate zone. A few other people moved through, professionals in good shoes, carrying coffee cups with purpose. Marcus looked down at his own shoes, the ones that were slightly too tight. He'd done well. He knew it the way you know a thing without confirmation, the quality of the handshakes, the way Howard had stopped clicking his pen in the last 20 minutes, and just listened the specific way Sandra had looked up from her notebook twice during the part about the budget overrun on the Meridian project. He'd done well, but well wasn't the same as good enough, and he knew that too. He pulled out his phone. He'd missed a call from his sister Denise, and a text from Lily's school about an upcoming field trip permission slip. He typed back a quick acknowledgement, and then sat there another minute, thinking about the other 4 candidates who probably had the certification, who probably hadn't spent the past 3 years improvising at survival. He thought about the $847 in his checking account. He thought about Lily asleep with her elephant, her stars, her Lily's sunshine walls. He stood up, walked out into the September morning, called Denise back, and told her the interview went fine. He'd know next week. Yes, he was eating. Yes, he was sleeping. No, he was not okay, but he was managing, which was the same thing. And then he went to find Emily's car. She wasn't there. Of course she'd said she had errands. He'd texted her the address of a coffee place 2 blocks away, and that's where he found her at a corner table with 2 cups already waiting, reading something on her phone. She looked up when he came in. She searched his face. "Tell me," she said. He sat down, picked up the coffee. It was exactly how he took it. He'd never told her, but she knew. "I did well," he said. "I don't know if it's enough." "Okay," she said. 4 other candidates." "Okay. One of them probably has the certification." "Probably," she agreed. "But probably not your job history, or the way you explain things, or the fact that you stayed composed talking about Rachel in a high-pressure interview." She paused. "That takes strength. They would have seen that." He stared at the coffee cup. "I'm scared," he said. It came out before he weighed it, which wasn't like him. He didn't say that kind of thing out loud. Not to people outside the small circle of Denise and the therapist he'd stopped seeing when the copay got too high. Emily didn't rush to reassure him. She let it sit for a moment. "I know," she said finally. "I've got about 17 days of income left. After that, I'm into savings. After that, I'm into problem." "I know. Lily doesn't know. I need to keep it that way." "She won't find out from me." Emily's voice was quiet and absolute. He looked at her. "How are you so calm?" he said. She considered the question more carefully than most people would. "I spent a long time being afraid," she said. "Not about money, about other things. And at some point I got exhausted by it. Not brave, just too tired to keep being afraid." She wrapped both hands around her cup. "It looks like calm. It's actually just a different kind of managing." He nodded slowly. They stayed there for another hour. They talked about nothing important. Lily's upcoming school project, the cracked sidewalk at the end of the block that the city had been promising to fix for 8 months, a documentary. Emily had watched the night before about migratory birds that she described so vividly that Marcus actually wanted to see it. And somewhere in the middle of that conversation, sitting across from a woman who straightened his tie and kept 2 cups of coffee waiting and let him say, "I'm scared," out loud without making it awkward. sitting there in the middle of the ordinary morning after the most important interview of his life. Marcus Bennett had a thought that he immediately pushed away. It came back. He pushed it away again. It kept coming back. 3 days later, Lily met him at the door when he got home from a half-day on a temporary site job. "Emily taught me to make actual pie," she announced. Marcus blinked. "Like from scratch. The crust and everything." Lily held up both hands, which were faintly dusty with flour. She said the secret is cold butter. "Did you know that cold butter?" "I did not know that. Also, she said you should never overmix. You have to let it be a little lumpy." Lily paused, deeply serious. "The lumps are what make it work." "That sounds," Marcus said, hanging up his jacket, "like a metaphor." Lily wrinkled her nose. "What's a metaphor?" asked Emily. "She's still here," Lily said, already heading back to the kitchen. "We're doing the filling now." He stood in the hallway for a moment. He could hear them from where he was. Emily's low, warm voice explaining something about sugar ratios. Lily asking a question in that rapid-fire way she had when she was interested in something, the sound of a spoon against a bowl. He stood there and listened, and the sound of it moved through him like something he hadn't felt in years. He walked into the kitchen. Emily looked up from the counter flour on her forearm, a slight smile. "You're home early." "Yeah." He leaned against the doorframe looking at the two of them, the pie dish, the bowl, the general chaos of a proper baking session that had taken over his kitchen. "They let us go at noon, rain coming in." "The crust is done," Lily said proudly. "I did the whole thing." "She did the whole thing," Emily confirmed. He looked at Emily. Something simple and enormous moved in his chest. "You hungry?" she said. "I made extra filling. We could do 2 pies if you have another dish." "Emily." She tilted her head. "What?" He thought about saying something real, something that matched the size of what he was feeling. He opened his mouth. "Yeah," he said. "I'm starving." The call from Caldwell and Reed came 12 days later. Marcus was at the temporary job framing workout in Ridgewood. Nothing permanent, nothing near what he needed. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he almost let it go to voicemail because his hands were full and the foreman didn't like phones on site. He looked at the screen. Unknown. 555-0183. Area code downtown. He stepped away from the frame, pulled off one glove. "Marcus Bennett." "Marcus." It was Howard Kimball. "I appreciate your patience. I wanted to call you personally." The way he said it, personally, already told Marcus what was coming. People called personally to deliver the good news that felt too important to email. Or they called personally to deliver bad news that felt too impersonal to email. And the tone careful, measured, apologetic underneath the professional surface. "We've made our decision," Howard said, "and we've had to go in a different direction. The candidate we've selected has 12 years of PM experience and brings the PMP certification. It was a very close decision. I want you to know that." Marcus closed his eyes. "I appreciate you saying so," he said. His voice came out steady. He was proud of that. "I want to encourage you to continue the certification process," Howard said. "You interviewed exceptionally. Your project history is solid. If something opens up in the next 6 to 12 months, I'd like you to apply again." "I will," Marcus said. He hung up. He put the phone in his pocket. He stood there on the edge of a half-framed room in Ridgewood, with the smell of sawdust and the sound of nail guns in the background, and he pressed the heel of his hand against the stud wall and pushed, not hard, just something to push against. 6 to 12 months. He didn't have 6 to 12 months. He had 17 days. Now 14. He called Denise. She picked up on the second ring, heard his voice, and said, "Oh, honey." "Yeah," he said. "Are you okay?" "I'm standing on a job site. I'm going to go back to work in a minute." "Marcus." "I'm fine," he said. "I just needed to tell someone." "Come for dinner Sunday. Let me make something." "Maybe." "Not maybe. Yes." He almost smiled. "Yes." He hung up, put the phone away, pulled his glove back on. And then something happened that he hadn't expected. He thought about Emily. Not Denise, whose love was unconditional and whose casseroles were excellent. Not his buddies at the job site, good men with short attention spans for emotional conversation. Not even Lily, who needed him to be whole. He thought about Emily, sitting across from him in that coffee shop, letting him say, "I'm scared," out loud. About the 2 cups waiting. About "I pay attention." About "how much more do you need?" I thought about how, if she were here right now, she wouldn't try to fix it or reframe it or give him a list of next steps. She'd just be here, present, calm. And that thought, that specific thought about wanting her here, was the moment Marcus Bennett stopped telling himself it was just friendship. He went back to work. He didn't tell Emily about the call that evening. He needed one night to sit with it himself first, to let the disappointment settle before he could talk about it without it cracking his voice. He sat on his porch after Lily was asleep. September had started to cool. The sky was clear, the kind of clear you only got in fall, that deep suburban dark, where you could actually see stars if you looked. He was on his 2nd cup of coffee when he heard Emily's back door. A minute later, she came around the side of the house with her own cup and looked at him with the direct, uncomplicated clarity that he had come to depend on more than he'd realized. "They called," she said. It wasn't a question. He nodded. She came and sat on the step beside him, not on the other chair, but right there on the step, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her against his arm. "Tell me," she said. "I did. All of it. The call." Howard's words, the certification, the 6 to 12 months. He told her about the 14 days, about the savings account, about the number in his head that represented the point after which he'd have to make choices he didn't want to make. She listened to every word. She didn't interrupt. She didn't problem solve. She just listened with her coffee in both hands and her shoulder almost touching his. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You know what I think," she said. "Tell me." "I think Howard Kimball is going to call you in 6 months because the person he hired isn't going to be you." She said it simply, without drama. Not a slight on them. Just they're not you. And he recognized something in that interview. People don't call personally to reject candidates they've already forgotten. He looked at the sky. "In the meantime," she said, "you're still here. Lily's still here. The house is still standing." A pause. "And I hear you're very handy with a leaking roof." He turned to look at her. Her profile in the dark, the slight tilt of her chin, the steadiness that she wore like something permanent and earned. "My neighbor has a loose step on her back porch," he said. "3rd from the top." "She does," Emily said. "I could look at it this weekend." She would appreciate that. A silence. The good kind. "Emily." "Yeah." He thought about what she'd done that morning. The coffee, the car, the tie, the pie with cold butter and lumps that make it work. 12 days of checking in without pressing. The way she sat beside him on the step instead of across from him in the chair. He thought about, how much more do you need? And he thought more. I need more. I just don't know yet if I have the right to ask. "Thank you," he said. She leaned her head slightly, just slightly toward his shoulder. Not all the way, not resting, just a degree or two like acknowledgement. "Don't thank me," she said. "Just fix the step." He laughed. And the stars stayed where they were, and the coffee got cold, and they stayed on that porch long past the point when reasonable adults went to sleep, because some conversations earn their time, and some silences are the most honest thing 2 people can offer each other. And somewhere in the dark between those 2 houses, without either of them saying so, yet something had changed. Something real. Something that was only just beginning. 3 weeks after the Caldwell and Reed rejection, Marcus Bennett was running out of runway. Not metaphorically, literally. The savings account had dropped below $4,000, which sounded like a number until you put it next to the mortgage. The utility bills, Lily's school fees, the truck repair. He couldn't avoid any longer, and the quiet, persistent cost of just keeping a household alive. $4,000 looked like a wall until you started listing what was on the other side of it, and then it looked like tissue paper. He didn't tell Emily any of this. He told himself it was because he didn't want to burden her. But the real reason, the one he examined late at night when he was honest with himself, was that he was ashamed. Not of struggling. He'd made peace with struggling. He was ashamed of having let someone see him clearly enough that hiding would feel like a lie. So he kept working. 2 temp jobs running simultaneously, framing work in Ridgewood in the mornings, a warehouse loading shift 3 evenings a week that paid $14 an hour, and left his back sore in a way that didn't fully go away anymore. He came home tired, made dinner, helped Lily with her homework, tucked her in, and then sat at the kitchen table with his bills spread out in front of him like a map of a country he was trying not to get lost in. Some nights he made progress. Some nights he just stared. Emily noticed. Of course she noticed. She was the kind of person who registered the specific angle of a man's shoulders when he was carrying something he hadn't told anyone about. She didn't say anything directly that wasn't her way, but she started leaving things. A casserole dish on his back step with a sticky note that said, "No occasion." A library book for Lily that she'd thought Lily would like, which Lily immediately declared the best book she'd ever read. A cup of coffee passed over the fence at 7:30 some mornings, sometimes with a look that asked everything without asking anything. Marcus took the coffee, said thank you, kept the rest inside. He was 3 days into October when Lily came home from school and announced with the absolute authority of an 8-year-old with new information that she had told her teacher, her neighbor Emily, was a professional baker, and that her teacher had asked if Emily would consider donating something to the school bake sale. Marcus was in the kitchen when Lily delivered this news. He turned around slowly. "You told your teacher what?" "That Emily is a professional baker," Lily said with complete confidence. "Because she basically is. Her pie is better than the grocery store. That's professional." "Lily, you can't just—" "She already said yes," Lily said. Marcus stared at her. "When did you ask her?" "After school. She was in her garden." Lily dropped her backpack by the door. "She said she'd make 2 pies and some of those lemon things she made last month. I told her the bake sale is Saturday." A pause. "She said she'd need your mixing bowls because hers aren't big enough." Marcus exhaled. I went next door that evening with Lily at his side and found Emily in her kitchen, already pulling ingredients from her cabinet, with the focused energy of someone who'd already decided to do something and didn't need a conversation about it. "You didn't have to say yes," Marcus said from the doorway. "I know," Emily said. "You could have told her to ask me first." She was very persuasive. "She's 8. "Exactly." Emily glanced over her shoulder at him. "The mixing bowls would help, if you don't mind." He minded. He didn't mind. He didn't know what he minded anymore when it came to Emily, and that was part of the problem. I went home, got the bowls, came back. Lily installed herself on a stool at Emily's kitchen counter like she owned the place. Marcus leaned against the doorframe and watched them work, and the feeling that moved through him was something he recognized but still hadn't named out loud. I was going to have to name it soon. He just wasn't ready yet. The bake sale was Saturday. Emily showed up with 2 apple pies, a tray of lemon bars, and a batch of snickerdoodles that she said almost didn't make it because she'd eaten 4 testing them the night before. The school gym smelled like sugar and elementary school and autumn. Lily walked beside Emily with the pride of a person who has made something happen, which she had. The pies sold in 20 minutes. Marcus watched Emily talk to Lily's teacher, easy, natural laughing at something the teacher said, one hand tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She was comfortable here in a way she wasn't always comfortable in the neighborhood, where Marcus had started to notice that certain looks from certain people made her go a little quieter, a little smaller, like she was trying to take up less space. He'd started noticing who those people were. A woman named Carol Hutchins, who lived at the end of the block and had the particular gift of saying cruel things in the tone of ordinary observation, had said within his earshot 2 weeks ago, "Isn't it sweet how she's taken Marcus under her wing? Bless her heart, though she must know it's not going anywhere." Marcus had stopped walking. Carol had seen him stop and gone slightly pale. He'd looked at her for a long moment and then kept walking because Lily was with him and he wasn't going to perform conflict in front of his daughter. But the words stayed. They sat in him ugly and hot, and he'd understood for the first time that the things being whispered about Emily weren't just unkind. They were wrong in a way that made him feel something protective and furious in equal measure. He'd told Emily none of this either. I was beginning to understand that the list of things he wasn't telling Emily had gotten very long and that most of them were about her. It was during the second week of October that everything started to accelerate. It began on a Tuesday evening when Marcus got home from the warehouse shift to find a note on his door. Not a letter, not an official document. Just a handwritten note from his landlord, Dale Pearson, who owned the house Marcus rented and had owned it for 11 years since Marcus and Rachel first moved in. The note said, "Call me. Urgent." Marcus called. Dale picked up on this first ring, which was unusual, and said, "I'm sorry to do this, Marcus. I've been putting it off for 2 months because I didn't know how to say it." A pause. "My daughter needs surgery. The bills are I'm going to have to sell the house. I've already talked to an agent. They want to list it by end of November." The silence on Marcus's end lasted several seconds. "End of November," he said. "I know the timing is terrible. I know. I've been trying to find another way." Dale's voice was genuinely pained. "There'll be a standard 60-day notice. That takes you to right around Christmas. I'm so sorry. If there's anything I can do to help with the transition." "I appreciate that, Dale," Marcus said. He hung up. He sat down on the kitchen chair. Christmas. He had until Christmas to find a new place to live, put together first and last, and deposit on a new rental in a market that had not improved in his favor, and do all of it without letting Lily understand that the house she'd grown up in, the house with the yellow walls and the white stars and the shelf shaped like a castle, was about to stop being theirs. He sat there for a long time. He didn't call Denise. He didn't call his buddy Pete from the Ridgewood job. He sat in the kitchen in the silence of a house that wasn't going to be his house much longer, and felt the particular weight of being the only adult. He was still sitting there when his phone buzzed. "Emily, light's been on for 2 hours. You okay?" He looked at the message. He looked at the window. She was right, he hadn't moved, and the overhead light was still on. He typed, "Yeah, fine. Early night." Her response came back in less than 30 seconds. "Okay." And then after a pause, "I'm up if you need." He put the phone down. He picked it up again. He typed, "Can you come over?" She knocked on the back door 4 minutes later, wearing a gray sweater and holding nothing except her phone in one hand. No coffee, no casserole, no reason prepared. Just herself because he'd asked. He opened the door. She looked at his face and didn't say anything. She came in, sat down at the kitchen table in the chair that had become hers over the past 2 months through repetition and habit, and waited. He told her, all of it. Dale the house, December the deposit. He didn't have the math that didn't work. He talked for 7 minutes straight without stopping, and she listened with her hands flat on the table and her eyes steady on his. And when he was done, she let the silence hold for a moment before she spoke. "When do you need to tell Lily?" He blinked. He'd expected he didn't know what he'd expected. Solutions, maybe. Or sympathy. Or the gentle reframing thing she sometimes did that made problems feel smaller. He hadn't expected that. "I don't know," he said. "Not yet. I need to figure out where we're going first." "That makes sense." She nodded slowly. "What's the realistic range on a new rental for the neighborhood, the school district?" "I can't stay in this school district," he said. "Not at current prices. I'd have to go further out." "How far out?" "Far enough that Lily changes schools." Emily absorbed this. She'd survive it. "I know she would." He rubbed the back of his neck. "She's tougher than I give her credit for. She's already lost so much. I don't want to take the school too." "I know," Emily said, and her voice had gone quieter. They sat with it. The weight of a life that had narrowed incrementally to a list of things Marcus was trying not to take away from his daughter. "I have some money set aside," Emily said. Her voice was careful. "Not a lot, but I could—" "No," Marcus said immediately. "Marcus? No." He said it without anger, but without any room in it. "I'm not taking money from you. That's not something I'm going to do." She didn't push. She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her deciding something, whether to say the next thing or hold it back. She held it back. "Okay," she said. "I'll figure it out." "I know you will." The way she said it not reassurance, not performance. Just a statement of what she believed. Simple and absolute. He looked at her. "Why?" he said. She tilted her head. "Why what? Why do you believe that?" He wasn't challenging her. He genuinely wanted to know. "You've watched me fail the job interview. You know about the second job. You know the numbers. Why do you still say it like that, like it's just a fact?" Emily was quiet for a moment. She looked at her hands. "Because I've watched you parent," she said finally. "For 7 months. I've watched you make Lily's lunch before you make your own. I've watched you go to school events on days when you were clearly exhausted. I've watched you stay calm when she has a meltdown, and then wait until you thought no one was looking to lean against the wall and breathe for 30 seconds. She looked up. A man who does that doesn't fail. He might go through something hard, but he doesn't fail. The honesty of it moved through him like something physical. He didn't say anything. She stood up. "I should let you sleep." "Emily." She turned at the door. He searched for the right words and couldn't find them. Not the ones that matched the scale of what he felt. Not the ones that were safe enough to say, without breaking something open, that he wasn't sure either of them was ready for. "Thank you," he said. She smiled, that real smile, the one that was nothing like the polite version. "Fix the step," she said. He laughed. She left. He sat in the kitchen for another hour, and this time it wasn't dread sitting with him. It was something else. Something warmer and more complicated. Something that was starting to feel an awful lot like the beginning of a decision. October moved fast after that. Marcus worked every available hour. He picked up a weekend job doing finish work on a kitchen renovation through a contact he'd made on the Ridgewood site, a private client who paid cash and didn't ask questions about timelines. He filed his renewed application with 2 more construction firms, reached out to a former supervisor who'd gone independent and might have subcontract work, and started quietly researching the PMP certification process, the study materials, the exam schedule, the cost, the timeline. He hadn't given up on Caldwell and Reed. He'd put it in a drawer. That was different. Some evenings, when the day had been long and Lily was asleep and the house was quiet, he found himself just sitting with the problem. Not the financial problem, but the Emily problem, which was not really a problem at all, and was entirely a problem simultaneously in the way that the most important things tend to be. He'd known her for 2 years. He'd started to really see her 7 months ago. He knew how she took her coffee, and that she always had a book going that she was reading in parallel with an audiobook that was different from the book, and that she baked when she was stressed, but pretended she was doing it for other reasons, and that she had a laugh she kept for moments when she'd actually caught herself off guard. That was completely different from her regular laugh, and he'd heard that laugh twice and thought about it more times than he would ever admit. He also knew because he paid attention. Now, the way she'd once told him, she paid attention, that she shrank sometimes. That there were moments when she seemed to check herself against some internal measurement and find herself wanting, and in those moments she went a little quieter, stood a little straighter in a way that looked confident but was actually armor. He knew what that kind of armor felt like. He'd been wearing his own version of it for 3 years. How was sitting on the porch on a Wednesday evening when his neighbor Dave Kowalski, retired, well-meaning, occasionally insufferable, leaned over the fence and said with that casual authority men his age sometimes used for opinions they hadn't examined, "That woman next door been over here a lot, huh?" "Emily," Marcus said. "Yeah, she's good people. Kind of surprising she and you know." Dave made a vague gesture. Marcus waited. "I mean no offense," Dave said, which was always what people said right before they offered some. "She's just not exactly another gesture. You know." Marcus looked at Dave for a long moment. "Dave," he said, "what exactly are you trying to say?" Dave seemed to realize he'd miscalculated. "I just mean you could—" "I could what?" A silence. "She's a good woman," Dave finally said, retreating into the only true thing he'd started with. "She's the best person I know," Marcus said, and he didn't say it defensively or as a performance for Dave's benefit. He said it the way you say something when you're hearing yourself say it for the first time and realizing as you hear it that you mean it completely. Dave nodded, mumbled something and went inside. Marcus sat with what he'd just said. She's the best person I know." He sat with it for a long time. The third week of October arrived like a gut punch. On a Monday, the kitchen renovation client called to say he was putting the project on hold, some family situation. He was sorry he'd pay Marcus for the week already completed, but couldn't commit further. $1,200 Marcus had been counting on gone. On a Wednesday, the warehouse called to say they were cutting the evening crew to 2 days a week through the end of the year. On a Friday, Lily's school sent home a letter about a class trip to Washington, D.C. in the spring, $450 deposits due by November 15th. Marcus sat with that letter for a full 5 minutes. Then he folded it very carefully, put it in the bill drawer, and made dinner. That evening he was washing dishes when he heard something he hadn't expected. A car he didn't recognize in Emily's driveway. A man's voice, low and heated, carrying through the thin October air. He turned off the faucet. The voice got louder, not shouting, but the kind of loud that was meant to dominate, to fill space. The kind that turned volume into pressure. Marcus dried his hands. He went to the back door and opened it quietly and stood on the step, and he could hear the words now, fragments but enough. "Don't be like this, Em. And, you know what we had. And, you think some neighbor is going to..." He was down the steps and across the yard in 30 seconds. Emily was on her porch. The man was on the bottom step facing up at her mid-40s, big, the kind of man who'd learned long ago that his size was useful in arguments. He had his hands up in a gesture that was technically open-palmed and non-threatening, and was neither of those things. Emily saw Marcus coming. The man and Marcus understood in one look, one complete and immediate understanding, who this was, what history lived between them. The man followed her eyes and turned. "Who's this?" he said. Dismissive, reflexive. "My neighbor," Emily said. Her voice was flat and steady, in a way Marcus recognized as controlled, not calm. "Your neighbor," the man repeated. Something ugly flickered in his expression. "Of course. Big house husband's been gone 3 years, and now the neighbor comes running." He looked Marcus up and down with the lazy contempt of a man who'd never had anyone push back. "This a regular thing, you keeping each other company?" Marcus stopped at the edge of the porch step. He looked at Emily. "You okay?" "I'm fine," she said. "She's fine." The man, whose name was Derek, Marcus would learn later. Derek Wills, Emily's ex-husband, 4 years of marriage that had ended when Emily finally understood that a man who criticizes everything you eat and wear and do in public and tells you he's just trying to help is not helping. Derek said, "She's always fine. She doesn't need babysitting." "I wasn't talking to you," Marcus said. Derek's eyes narrowed. "Emily," Marcus said again. "Do you want him to leave?" A pause. Marcus watched something move across Emily's face. Something that had been locked down and managed for a very long time began to change. He saw at the exact moment she decided not to be small about this. "Yes," she said. "I want him to leave." "I want you to leave Derek," she said, and her voice was different now. Clearer. "We've talked twice this year. Both times you've wanted money. I don't have money for you, and I don't owe you anything. Please go." Derek turned back to Marcus with an expression that had moved from contempt to something more calculated. "You know what her problem is." "I'm not interested," Marcus said. "She's never learned to." "I said I'm not interested." Marcus held the man's gaze. Not aggressive, not posturing, just absolutely, completely unwilling to step back. "She asked you to leave, so you should leave." The two men looked at each other. Derek was bigger. Marcus was utterly still in a way that had nothing to do with size. Derek laughed the defensive laugh of a man who needed the last word. "Big man," he said. "Good luck with her. She's a lot of work." He looked up at Emily one more time. "Call me when you're thinking straight." He got in the car. He left. Marcus stood in Emily's driveway until the taillights were gone. Then he turned around. Emily was sitting on the top porch step now, elbows on her knees. Her hands were clasped together tight enough that the knuckles were pale. He went up and sat beside her. Neither of them said anything for a moment. "How long has he been back in town?" Marcus said. "He came by 2 weeks ago. Emily said. Marcus turned to look at her. 2 weeks ago, he said. I didn't want to, I handled it. Emily. I know. She exhaled. I know. I should have said something. She pressed her lips together. I've been handling Derek by myself for a long time. Old habit. You don't have to handle everything by yourself. She looked at her hands. I know that, she said. Intellectually, it's harder in practice. She paused. He wants money. He always comes back when he wants something. He spent 4 years teaching me that my job was to manage his needs and be grateful he was still around. Her voice was controlled, but the truth moved underneath it, cold and old. It's amazing how long that takes to stop feeling true. Marcus sat with that. What he said, Marcus started. About you being a lot of work. Don't. I'm going to. She looked at him. He was trying to make that sound like an insult, Marcus said. But you know what actual work is. Actual work is sitting with someone in their worst moments and not needing them to perform okay. Actual work is showing up with coffee when someone failed an interview. Actual work is being present without being asked. He held her gaze. That's what you do. For me. For Lily. A pause. That's not a lot of work. That's called being a good person. Emily's jaw moved. Marcus, I mean it. I know you do. Her voice was quiet. That's why it's hard to hear. He frowned. Why? She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the street sounds filled the space between them, a car passing the distant bark of a dog. Because, she said finally, I spent 4 years being told the opposite by someone I trusted. And somewhere along the way, I started believing him. She looked at Marcus. When you say things like that, I want to believe them. And wanting to believe something very much is it makes me afraid. Because the last time I believed someone that much. She stopped. He understood. He didn't push. He just stayed where he was beside her on the step, close enough that their arms were almost touching. You're not him, she said. I know that. I know that here. She touched her temple. It's here. She touched her chest. That's still figuring it out. Take your time, Marcus said. She looked at him. Take your time, he said again. I'm not going anywhere. And he meant it. He meant it in the immediate sense he would sit on this porch step until she was okay. But he also meant it in the other sense, the larger one, the one that had been building since September, and was no longer something he could honestly call friendship. Emily looked at him for a long moment. You said that about the house, she said softly. But you might have to go somewhere. The house, right. Maybe, he said. The house might move. I'm not going anywhere. He paused. That's different. She turned to look forward again at the empty street at the ordinary Tuesday evening that had just contained something that was not ordinary at all. He's going to come back, she said. Probably. He always does. I know. Next time. She stopped. Next time you tell me, he said. Before, not after. She was quiet. Emily. Okay, she said. Promise me. She turned and looked at him with an expression he couldn't fully decode, something complicated and raw and more honest than the careful, composed face she usually offered the world. Okay, she said again. I promise. They sat there until the cold started to come in off the street, and Emily's hands unclenched, and the night moved from crisis into something quieter and steadier. At some point, Marcus realized he'd put his hand over hers on the porch step, not romantically, not as a move, just as a fact. The way you reach for someone's hand when they're shaking, and you want them to know you're solid. She didn't move her hand away. They sat like that until she was ready to go inside. He walked home in the dark. He stood in his kitchen and looked at the overhead light and thought about everything that had just happened and everything that hadn't happened yet, and the distance between those two things, which was getting shorter every day. He thought about a man who'd looked at Emily Carter and decided she was a lot of work. He thought about sitting beside her on that step. He thought about, I'm not going anywhere. He thought I meant that. All of it. I meant every word. And then he thought of Lily, asleep upstairs, her stars, her castle shelf, the Lily's sunshine walls, and the house that wasn't going to be theirs much longer, and the mountain of things he still hadn't solved. But underneath the weight of all of it, something was alive. Something that had been quiet for 3 years was awake and moving and refusing to be pushed back down. He turned off the kitchen light. He went upstairs. He checked on Lily. She was asleep on her side, Gerald the elephant tucked under one arm, breathing the deep and even breath of a child who didn't know yet how complicated the world was getting. Marcus stood in the doorway for a long time. "I've got us," he said quietly. "I don't know how yet, but I've got us." He meant Lily. He also meant Emily. He wasn't ready to say that out loud yet to anyone but the dark. But he meant it. With everything he had left. The week after Derek left, Marcus woke up every morning already tired. Not the physical tired from the double shifts though, that was there too, sitting in his lower back and behind his eyes like something permanent. This was the other kind. The tired that comes from carrying too many things at once and not being able to put any of them down. He had 11 weeks until the house listed. He had one temp job left after the warehouse cut his hours. He had a daughter who'd started asking quiet questions at dinner, not about money because Lily was 8 and didn't have the vocabulary for that yet, but about the kind of things children ask when they sense something is wrong and don't know how to name it. Things like, "Are we going to stay here forever?" "Daddy and Emily's not going anywhere, right?" The second question hit him harder than the first. He also had a woman next door who had let him hold her hand on a porch step and hadn't said a word about it since. And Marcus was not sure whether that was because she'd decided it meant nothing, or because, like him, she was still deciding what it meant and was afraid to get the calculation wrong. He didn't push. He showed up instead. That was the only thing he knew how to do. Show up, keep moving, stay present, and hope that the distance between where he was and where he needed to be was crossable if he kept walking. He fixed her back porch step on a Saturday morning while Lily was at her friend Cora's house. Emily brought him coffee at 9 and sat on the step above the one he was working on, and they talked about everything except the thing sitting between them, which was its own kind of conversation. "You know you don't have to do this," she said. "Loose step is a liability," he said without looking up from the board. "That's a very professional way to say you want to help." "I'm a professional." "You're a man with a hammer and too much pride to accept casseroles gracefully." He looked up at that. She was watching him with that slight smile. She had the real one, the one that lived at the corner of her mouth and reached her eyes. "I accepted the casseroles," he said. "You accepted them, and then immediately tried to pay me back by replacing my doorknob, fixing my gate latch, and recaulking my bathroom window. Those were legitimate maintenance issues." "Marcus." "Emily." She shook her head, still smiling. He went back to work. After a moment she said, "I called my sister this week." He kept working. "How'd that go?" "Strange." She wrapped both hands around her mug. "We haven't talked much since the divorce." She was on Derek's side for a while. Not aggressively, just quietly. The way people are when they don't understand what they didn't witness. And now, she called to apologize. Emily's voice shifted slightly, careful, like she was handling something that might still be fragile. "She saw him last month. He'd found someone else, already." A pause. She said she finally understood that a man who moves that fast was never really with anyone completely. Marcus set down his pry bar. "Is she right?" he said. Emily considered the question seriously the way she did. "Yes," she said. "In the end." She looked at the middle distance. "He used to tell me I was too much, too sensitive, too needy, too present, like my feelings were an inconvenience." She exhaled slowly. "What he actually meant was that I wanted a real relationship, and he wanted a managed one. There's a difference." Marcus looked at her. "You're not too much," he said. "I know that now," she said. "Most days." She met his eyes. "The days I forget are getting fewer." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he picked up the hammer again. "Good," he said. They stayed like that for another hour, him working her sitting. Both of them talking in the easy overlapping way they'd developed over months. The kind of conversation that didn't require a beginning or an end, because it was just the continuation of something that was always going. I didn't know it yet, but this was the last quiet morning they were going to have for a while. The first piece of bad news arrived on Monday. Marcus was on the Ridgewood site when his foreman, a heavy-set man named Carl, who delivered information the way someone drops heavy furniture suddenly, and without apology, pulled him aside and said the general contractor had just informed them the project was going into an indefinite hold. The building permit had been flagged for a zoning review. Nobody knew how long it would take. Could be 2 weeks, could be 3 months. Marcus's position was suspended effective Friday. Marcus stood there with his hard hat in his hand. Suspended, he said. Not terminated, Carl said, which was the kind of distinction that sounds important until you realize it means the same thing for a man with 11 weeks and a shrinking bank account. I appreciate the notice, Marcus said. He drove home that Friday for the last time, trying to do the math in his head. The warehouse was 2 days a week now. The finish work client was on hold. Ridgewood was suspended. His reserve had dropped to $2,800. First month's rent and deposit on a new place would be close to $4,000 minimum. He was going backward. He sat in the truck in his driveway for 3 minutes before getting out. I didn't tell Emily that night. He made Lily's dinner, checked her homework, listened to her read the first chapter of the library book Emily had brought, tucked her in, and then sat at the kitchen table alone with the bill drawer open, and a legal pad and a pen, and the absolute silence of a man trying to solve an equation that didn't balance. He was still at the table at midnight when his phone rang. Unknown number. Late. He almost let it go. Something made him answer. Is this Marcus Bennett? It is. Marcus, this is Sandra Park, from Caldwell and Reed. A pause. I'm sorry to call so late. I hope I'm not... I got your number from the application file. I wanted to reach you personally before anything became official. Marcus sat up straight. I'm listening, he said. The candidate we hired for the senior PM position, Sandra said carefully, has had a family situation arise. He's asked to delay his start date by 3 months, which unfortunately doesn't work for the timeline on our current projects. Another pause. Howard asked me to reach out to you. He'd like to know if you're still interested and available. The kitchen was very quiet. Yes, Marcus said. We'd want you to start November 1st. That's 2 weeks from now. Yes, he said again. I need to be transparent. The offer will be contingent on a background check and reference verification. Standard process. And we'd want to discuss the compensation and the certification timeline in a formal meeting. But Howard feels strongly that... She stopped. He said to tell you that you were the right candidate. The other hire was a resource decision, not a quality decision. Marcus put his hand flat on the kitchen table. Tell Howard I'll be there Monday, he said. He hung up. He sat very still for a long moment. Then he pressed both hands over his face and held them there, breathing, feeling the particular internal earthquake of a man whose entire body is trying to process relief and terror and gratitude simultaneously. He laughed once into his palms, the kind of laugh that's half a sob and entirely real. He needed to tell someone. His phone was in his hand before he finished the thought. He texted Emily. Are you awake? 3 dots. Immediately. Emily. Yes. Are you okay? He typed back. Come over. She knocked on the back door in 4 minutes, same gray sweater, same steady face, scanning his immediately for information about whether this was a crisis. He was grinning. She stopped. What happened? She said. Caldwell and Reed called, he said. Her hand went to her mouth. Their hire backed out. They want me for November 1st. He watched her face. Sandra Park called personally. Said Howard told her I was the right candidate the first time. Emily stood in his doorway with her hand over her mouth and her eyes filled, not dramatically, not with the kind of tears that needed the sudden involuntary kind that happens when something you've been hoping for someone else arrives and the feeling of it catches you before you can manage it. Marcus, she whispered. Yeah, he said. She crossed the kitchen and hugged him. He hadn't expected that. Not because it was wrong, but because it was so right and so easy, and her arms around him felt like something completing a circuit that had been open too long. He put his arms around her, and they stood there in the kitchen at midnight, and it wasn't romantic. In the performed sense, it was something more foundational than that two people who'd been holding each other up from a careful distance, finally closing the gap. She pulled back first, both of them slightly careful about where to look. "This changes everything," she said, composing herself. "The house is still going," he said. "But this changes the math. I can make a deposit work. I can look at places that stay in Lily's school district." He ran a hand through his hair. "I might actually be able to do this." "You are going to do this," she said, correcting his tense with quiet certainty. He looked at her. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" She frowned slightly. "For the morning of the interview," he said. "The car, the coffee, the tie." He paused. "For sitting on the step with me. For the soup and the book and the casseroles I handled ungracefully. For—" He stopped. "For all of it. For being here." Emily held his gaze. Something moved across her face, something complex and open and slightly afraid, which he recognized because he was feeling the same thing. "You don't have to thank me for that," she said softly. "I know," he said. "I want to." A beat. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. And they stood in the kitchen at midnight, not saying the rest of it. Yet both of them aware, it was there. Both of them aware, the other was aware. Circling it, the way you circle something important that you want to approach, right? She went home at 12:30. He stayed up another hour, not worried this time. Just thinking. About November 1st. About the school district. About Lily. About Emily. About the specific gravitational pull of standing in a kitchen at midnight with someone's arms around you and realizing you had not felt that safe in 3 years. He started the certification materials the next morning. The formal offer from Caldwell and Reed came through that Wednesday. Howard Kimball called himself not Sandra Howard, and talked Marcus through the compensation, which was above what Marcus had expected, and the project pipeline and the certification support the firm offered, which included a study stipend and 2 paid exam days. Marcus sat at the kitchen table with the legal pad and wrote down every number and then sat back and looked at what he'd written. The numbers worked. Not luxuriously, not without care, but they worked, and working was everything. He told Lily that evening. He sat her down on the couch, which was his official, "we're going to talk" position, and Lily immediately looked at him with the focused seriousness she reserved for things she understood were important. "I got a new job," he said. Lily stared at him. "A good one?" she asked. "A really good one?" She considered this. "Better than the truck job." "Much better." "Are we still moving?" He'd told her about the house 2 weeks ago, carefully framed around adventure and new places, and she'd cried for about 10 minutes, and then asked if Emily could come visit wherever they moved, and Marcus had said of course, and she'd accepted this with the resilience of children who have already learned that some things just happen, and the question is, what comes after? "We might be able to stay in the neighborhood," he said. "I'm still looking, but it's possible." Lily's face did something complicated. Hope landing on top of practiced acceptance, like someone who'd been braced for impact and wasn't sure yet whether to relax. "Does Emily know?" she said. "She was the first person I told." Lily nodded as if this was the correct order of operations. "Can we go tell her again together?" Marcus smiled. "Yeah," he said. "We can do that." They went next door after dinner. Emily opened the door, saw them both standing there, and Lily said, "Dad got the big job," with the announcement energy of someone who had also personally made this happen by believing in it, which Marcus thought she sort of had. Emily looked at Lily with pure warmth. "I heard," she said. "I think that calls for celebration." "Pie," Lily said immediately. "I was thinking pie," Emily agreed. Marcus stood in Emily's kitchen for the second time that week and watched his daughter and the woman who had become, without ceremony or announcement, the closest thing to a whole person his household contained, and something settled in him. Not resolved, Not finished, but settled. The specific piece of a man who has identified what matters and has stopped pretending otherwise. He just hadn't said it yet. That was about to change faster than he expected. The second piece of bad news arrived on a Friday at 4 in the afternoon, which Marcus would later think of as the universe's timing being either terrible or precise depending on the day. Howe was at the Caldwell and Reed office for his onboarding paperwork, background check forms, tax documents, the formal welcome meeting with Howard and Sandra and the project team when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He silenced it. Buzzed again. Silenced again. Then a third time, and he felt the particular frequency of repeated calls that means something is actually wrong. He excused himself to the hallway. 3 missed calls. All from a number he didn't recognize. And a voicemail. He played it. A woman's voice. Medical professional. The specific cadence of someone trained to deliver information without emotion as a mercy to both parties. Mr. Bennett, this is calling from Crestwood Elementary. Your daughter Lily had a fall on the playground this afternoon. She's okay, but she's asking for you and we need you to come in. She may have injured her wrist. We've been unable to reach your emergency contact. He was moving before the message finished. He knocked on Howard's door, said family emergency, I'm sorry, and was in his car in under 2 minutes. The drive to Crestwood Elementary took 9 minutes. He ran 3 yellow lights and didn't notice. Lily was in the nurse's office, sitting on the paper-lined table, with her left arm cradled against her chest and dried tear tracks on her face, eating a graham cracker with her right hand. She looked up when he came in, and her face did the thing it always did when she'd been holding it together and then saw him. It crumpled briefly before she pulled it back. I fell off the climbing structure, she said. I know, baby. He crouched down in front of her. Let me see. The nurse, a compact, efficient woman named Mrs. Tran, said she suspected a fracture of the distal radius and recommended immediate X-ray. The wrist was swollen. Lily winced when Mrs. Tran touched it, but didn't cry, which Marcus recognized as a form of courage his daughter had developed the hard way. Okay, he said. We're going to the hospital. Can you walk? It's my wrist, Dad, Lily said. Not my legs. Despite everything, he almost smiled. He texted Emily from the parking lot. Lily fell at school. Going to the ER. Wrist injury. She's okay, but I need. He stopped typing. Started again. Will you meet us there? The 3 dots appeared immediately. Emily. On my way. She was at the hospital when they arrived. Standing outside the emergency entrance with her hands clasped and her face doing the thing Marcus had come to recognize as Emily's version of controlled fear, composed on the surface, completely present underneath. She took one look at Lily and said, Hi, brave girl. Lily said, It hurts a lot. I know it does, Emily said, and she fell into step beside them and took Lily's good hand in hers and didn't let go. The ER took 2 hours. The X-ray confirmed a small buccal fracture, the doctor said. Common in kids, clean, would heal in 4 to 6 weeks with a cast. Lily chose purple. She was very firm about the purple. Marcus sat beside this bed while they did the casting, and Emily sat on Lily's other side, and Lily talked the entire time about the climbing structure, about how Tyler from her class had dared her, about how she hadn't even been that scared before she fell, about how the ground came up very fast. She was processing it the way children process things through narration, through making the story make sense. Emily listened to every word with complete attention. When the cast was done, and they were waiting for the discharge paperwork, Lily fell asleep, sitting up the crash of a child who's burned through every reserve of adrenaline and courage and graham crackers. Marcus caught her and eased her head onto his shoulder, and across Lily's sleeping body, he looked at Emily. Thank you for coming, he said. Emily shook her head slightly. Don't thank me. The same gesture she always made. I mean it, he said. I know you do, she said. Lily stirred, didn't wake. She keeps asking, Marcus said quietly, if you're going anywhere. Emily went still. I don't know what to tell her, he said. Because I don't know what to tell you first. And I should tell you first. Emily looked at him across his sleeping daughter. The ER was moving around them. The sound of the hospital doing its constant work, voices and equipment, and somewhere down the hall, someone calling a name. But in the specific small space around the three of them, everything had gone very quiet. "Marcus," Emily said. "I'm not good at this," he said. "I haven't done this since Rachel. I don't know the right way to say it, or the right time, and I've been trying to figure out both for weeks. But I think the truth is, there's no right time, and the only right way is just to say it." Emily's eyes were very steady. "So I'm saying it," he said. "I'm not asking you to fix anything or decide anything, or I'm just telling you that when things go wrong, you're the first person I want to call. That Lily asks about you the way she asks about people who are part of her life, not people who are visitors in it. That when I held your hand on your porch step, I wasn't being a good neighbor. I was being a man who—" He stopped, exhaled. "A man who doesn't want to keep pretending that's all this is." The silence after that was enormous. Lily breathed softly against his shoulder. Emily looked at him for a long time. Her eyes were bright, not crying, but close to it. The kind of close that means something is pressing against the inside of the chest, looking for a way out. "I'm afraid," she said finally. "I know." "Derek." "I'm not Derek," he said. Simply, no force behind it. Just the fact. "I know you're not." She swallowed. "That doesn't make the fear smaller. Not yet." She looked at her hands for a moment and then back at him. "I haven't let myself. I've been careful not to let myself want this, because if I want it and it goes wrong—" "I know," he said. "I'm not saying no," she said. His breath caught. "I'm saying—" She paused, choosing words with the care of someone who's been burned by saying the wrong ones before. "I'm saying I'm not ready to be afraid of losing it before I've let myself have it. And I've been doing that. Being afraid of losing something I haven't even reached for yet." She looked at Lily asleep and purple-casted and completely unaware of the conversation happening around her. "She asks if I'm going anywhere." Her voice went softer. "I'm not going anywhere." Marcus felt something in his chest unhook. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. They looked at her, and neither of them said anything else, because nothing else was needed in that moment, and the hospital kept moving around them, and Lily slept with her purple cast resting on her lap, and Marcus Bennett understood that something had just been decided, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. They drove home in Emily's car. Lily buckled in the back seat with her cast propped on a pillow Emily had grabbed from her own house before they left. Lily woke up enough to register the car and say, "Are we home?" And Emily said, "Almost." And Lily said, "Okay," and was asleep again in 40 seconds. Marcus carried her inside. Emily held the door. He got Lily into bed, careful with the arm, pulled the blanket up, stood in the doorway, the way he always did. Then he came back down. Emily was in the kitchen. She'd started tea, she knew where everything was, now had known for weeks, and was leaning against the counter waiting for the kettle. He stopped in the doorway. "You're going to be okay," she said. Not as comfort, as information. "We're going to be okay," he said, correcting her plural, deliberately. She looked at him. "We," she said. "We," he confirmed. The kettle clicked. She poured 2 cups. He sat at the table. She sat across from him. The same table they'd sat at for months. Different now, not in the furniture or the light or the kitchen itself, but in the air between them, which had changed its quality. Lighter, more honest, less careful. "She's going to be fine," Emily said. The wrist. 4 to 6 weeks, he said. Purple cast, which apparently is the most important detail. Obviously. She's going to use it to get out of homework. Obviously. He smiled. She smiled back. "I have to tell you something," Emily said. He looked up. Her hands were around the mug. She was looking at the table for a moment, then at him. "Derek called this morning," she said. The temperature in the room changed. "Before I knew about Lily," she said. "He said he needed to talk to me in person, that it was important, that he was coming by this weekend." Marcus set down his mug. He said there's money he thinks I owe him from the divorce. Emily continued. An asset that wasn't properly divided. His lawyer sent a letter last week I didn't tell you because I was still trying to understand what it meant. She paused. I talked to my own lawyer this afternoon, between Lily's hospital and picking up the car, while you were doing the discharge paperwork. What did your lawyer say? That Derek's claim has no merit. Her voice was careful. That the divorce was finalized completely and correctly, but that if he decides to file anyway, even a frivolous motion would cost me money to respond to. She met his eyes. Money I don't exactly have in reserve. Marcus said nothing for a moment. He's trying to pressure you, Marcus said. Yes. And he's going to show up Saturday. That's what he said. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the table. Then I'll be here Saturday, he said. Marcus. Emily. His voice was even. I told you. When he comes back, you tell me before, not after. He held her gaze. You promised. She looked at him. The clock on the wall ticked. You just told me before, he said. So that's the promise kept. He sat back. Saturday I'll be around, not performing, not making a scene, just around. She exhaled slowly. He's going to say things. He's going to try. About you. About me. About Emily. He waited until she was looking at him. Let him say whatever he wants. The only opinion in that driveway I care about is yours. She was quiet for a long moment. And mine, he added. Almost. She almost smiled. You're very stubborn, she said. My daughter says the same thing. She's right. He picked up his mug again. She usually is. They stayed in the kitchen for another hour, talking about nothing heavy. The job, Lily's school situation, a recipe. Emily was developing for the bake sale she'd half committed to at the church 2 streets over. Ordinary things. The ordinary things that were. Marcus had learned the infrastructure of something real. At midnight, she stood to go. He walked her to the back door. She paused on the step he'd repaired, and turned back. Saturday, she said. Saturday, he confirmed. You don't have to. I know. He met her eyes. I want to. She held his gaze for a beat. Then she reached up very quickly, the way someone does something before they can think about it too much, and kissed him on the cheek. Close to the corner of his mouth. Warm. Brief. Real. She was down the steps and across the yard before he could say anything. He stood in the back doorway in the cold October night, one hand against the doorframe, feeling the warmth of that for a long time after she was gone. Saturday came fast. Marcus woke early. Made breakfast, helped Lily navigate toast and orange juice with her left hand in a purple cast. Listened to Lily's theory that the cast would make her faster because it was aerodynamic, did not challenge this theory, and was in his driveway by 10, cleaning out the truck, which had finally been repaired, mostly good enough to run, when Derek Wills pulled up in front of Emily's house at 10:14. I was alone this time. No bluster in the approach, which was different. Derek had a folder under his arm, and the specific energy of a man who thought he'd found leverage. He saw Marcus immediately. Something flickered across his face, recalibration. Neighbor, Derek said. Derek, Marcus said, wiping his hands on a rag. She know you're out here. I'm cleaning my truck, Marcus said. In my driveway. Derek looked at him for a moment, measuring. Then he walked up to Emily's door and knocked. Emily answered. Marcus didn't watch the door, he kept working, kept his back mostly turned within earshot and visible from the porch. Present without looming. He heard Derek's voice. Low, controlled. The performance of reasonableness. He heard the folder opening. Heard Emily say something short and clear that he couldn't make out. Then Derek's voice rose. Not much. Just enough. You're going to want to think about this carefully, Em. This isn't... I have thought about it. Emily's voice came back clear enough to carry. My lawyer has also thought about it. The answer is no. Your lawyer. Derek. Her voice had that flat, absolute quality Marcus had heard once before the night Derek first came back. We've talked. My answer hasn't changed. It's not going to change. I'm asking you to leave my property. You're serious? I'm completely serious. You know I can make this. You can file whatever you want, she said. My lawyer will handle it. A pause. I'm done being afraid of what you'll do. That took me longer than it should have, but I'm done. Silence. Marcus kept his eyes on the truck. He heard Derek's footsteps on the porch, coming down. He heard the man pause on the bottom step. This the guy? Derek said, not quite to Marcus, not quite to Emily, just out loud, the way people say things when they want everyone to hear. Nobody answered. Good luck, Derek said, and the contempt in it was enormous and impotent, the contempt of a man who's just realized the leverage he thought he had was imaginary. He got in the car. He drove away. Marcus set down the rag and turned around. Emily was standing on her porch. She was shaking, not visibly, not dramatically, but he knew her well enough now to see it in the slight tightness around her jaw and the way she was gripping the porch railing. He walked over. He stopped at the bottom step and looked up at her. You okay? He said. She nodded. You're shaking, he said. I know. She released the railing, looked at her hand. I've been afraid of him for so long, even after I left, even after the divorce. She looked at Marcus. That's the first time I've ever told him no and meant it completely. She let out a breath. It's... She stopped. Yeah, Marcus said. Terrifying, she said. And also the best I've felt in 4 years. He looked at her. She looked back. Come inside, she said. I'll make coffee. He went up the steps. Lily came out the back door at that exact moment, purple cast, first shouting that Gerald the elephant had fallen under the bed and she couldn't reach him with only one good arm, and could Emily help because Emily's arms were longer. The crisis of Gerald the elephant's location broke across both of them, and they both turned toward Lily, and both answered at the same time, Marcus saying, I'll get him, and Emily saying, let me. And then both stopped and looked at each other. Lily looked between them. You can both get him, she said with 8-year-old practicality. Gerald is very stuck. And Marcus Bennett followed Emily Carter into his daughter's bedroom to rescue a stuffed elephant named Gerald, and the specific ordinary rightness of it moved through him like something he hadn't let himself feel in 3 years. He was done being careful about it. He was done waiting for the right time, the right words, the right distance. Something was happening here, had been happening, and the only wrong move left was pretending otherwise. Gerald the elephant was recovered from under the bed at 10:47 on a Saturday morning, and that small, ridiculous rescue. Marcus on his knees reaching under the frame. Emily holding Lily's good hand so she didn't try to crawl under herself with a purple cast was the first moment Marcus could remember in a long time where he felt the specific weight of ordinary happiness. Not relief, not survival, happiness. The small domestic kind that doesn't announce itself, just settles. Lily clutched Gerald to her chest and said, He was scared under there. I'm sure he was, Emily said. He doesn't like the dark. Most people don't, Marcus said, standing up and dusting off his knees. Lily studied Gerald's felt face with the seriousness of a diagnostician. He's okay now, she decided. Then she looked up at both of them. Can we make pancakes? Marcus looked at Emily. Emily looked at Marcus. I'll do the batter, Emily said. I'll do the pan, Marcus said. Lily was already headed for the kitchen. That was how November began. Not with declarations or decisions written out on legal pads, but with pancakes on a Saturday morning and a purple-casted 8-year-old directing operations from her stool at the counter. Marcus made the coffee. Emily made the batter from memory without measuring anything, which Lily found fascinating and Marcus found quietly impressive. They moved around each other in the kitchen with the ease of people who have learned each other's rhythms without being taught who steps left, who reaches over, who gets out of the way. It was domesticity without a name on it. And for the first time, neither of them was pretending it was something less than what it was. Derek did not come back that weekend, or the one after. Emily's lawyer sent a formal letter, and the response from Derek's lawyer was, according to Emily's lawyer, exactly what you'd expect from a case with no merit. First aggressive, then quiet, then nothing. By the second week of November, The folder Derek had carried up her porch steps had been replaced by a silence that felt increasingly like retreat. Emily told Marcus about each development the day it happened. She didn't wait, didn't manage it alone, didn't deliver it, already processed and resolved. She told him as it was happening, which was new for her, and Marcus received each update the way he'd promised, present steady, not trying to fix what didn't need fixing. He started at Caldwell and Reed on November 1st. The first week was the particular intensity of new office, new team, new rhythms, a project pipeline that was already running and needed him to catch up fast. Howard Kimball was the kind of manager who trusted people by giving them real work immediately, which Marcus respected and also found slightly terrifying in the first 72 hours. He was managing 3 concurrent projects inside 2 weeks, all at different stages, all with different teams underneath him. He came home tired in a different way than before. Not the bone-deep exhaustion of manual labor, though his body still registered the absence of physical work. This was the mental tired of someone whose brain had been fully engaged all day, and it was the kind of tired he'd forgotten he enjoyed. He told Emily about it over her fence one evening, the specific challenge of a subcontractor who kept missing communication windows, a city permit delay on the Henderson project, a junior PM on his team named Antonio, who was talented but had the irritating habit of solving problems without telling anyone he'd solved them until the solution was already implemented. "Antonio sounds like me," Emily said. Marcus tilted his head. "You think, solving things quietly and then presenting them finished." She leaned on the fence. "It feels safer. If you tell people what you're working on, they can tell you it won't work before you find out whether it will." Marcus thought about that. "I'll approach him differently," he said. "Don't tell him I said that. He doesn't know you exist." "That's very reassuring." He smiled. She smiled back. These were the evenings he was storing up, he realized. Not banking against some future loss, but simply holding them the way you hold something that has weight and warmth. The second week of November brought the first real test. It came in the form of Carol Hutchins, the woman from the end of the block, who had said what she said about Emily 2 months ago. Carol was part of a neighborhood group loosely organized, mostly an email chain and a semi-annual block party committee, and she had apparently decided, based on some combination of observation and assumption, that the developments between Marcus and Emily warranted commentary. Marcus found out about it, the way you find out about neighborhood commentary secondhand, through his friend Pete, who lived 4 houses down and had been included in an email chain he absolutely should not have been included in. Pete was a decent man, with the unfortunate quality of total transparency, which meant that when he showed up at Marcus's door on a Wednesday evening with a six-pack and an expression like a man about to deliver bad news, Marcus knew immediately that something had been said. "I'm just going to tell you," Pete said, "because you'd want to know." "Tell me," Marcus said. Pete pulled out his phone, read from the email chain. Carol's words, the precise language of someone who believes cruelty becomes acceptable when it's framed as concern. The substance of it was this, that Marcus was clearly in a difficult period, that his attachment to Emily was understandable, given his circumstances, but that the neighborhood hoped he wasn't making a decision out of loneliness, that he'd regret later, given that Emily was. And here was the phrase that Pete read carefully, and with evident discomfort, not the kind of woman a man like Marcus typically ends up with. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "She sent this to how many people?" he said. "The whole block committee," Pete said, "which is about 14 addresses." Marcus set down his coffee. "Did Emily see it?" Pete's face said everything. Marcus was out the door and across to Emily's in under a minute. He knocked not hard, but not lightly. She answered. One look at her face, and he knew. Her eyes were clear and dry. She had not been crying, or had stopped recently, or was not going to. But her face had gone to that particular closed-down stillness that he recognized now as her version of bracing against something. "You saw it," he said. "Carol texted me a copy," Emily said, with a note saying she thought I should know what people were saying and that she'd tried to correct the record. A pause. The note was worse than the email. He stepped inside. She moved back to let him. "Emily, I'm fine," she said. And then immediately, "I'm not fine. She pressed her lips together. I'm angry. I'm embarrassed. I'm... She stopped. Exhaled. I hate that I'm embarrassed. That's the part that makes me the most angry. That someone else's cruelty made me feel ashamed. You have nothing to be ashamed of. I know that. Her voice was tight. I know it. And I still felt it. That's what 4 years with Derek does. You learn to receive judgment like it's your fault. She looked at him. I'm working on that. Marcus stood in her hallway. Can I say something? He said. She waited. What Carol Hutchins thinks about us, he said, is information about Carol Hutchins. That's it. That's the entire content of that email. It tells us nothing true about you or about me or about whatever this is. He held her gaze. And I want you to hear me say that directly, not as comfort, not as something I'm saying to make you feel better, as a fact. Emily looked at him. Okay, she said after a moment. Okay, She exhaled again, slower this time. I believe you. I'm going to have to hear it a few more times before it lands completely. But I believe you. I'll say it as many times as you need, he said. She almost smiled. That's either very sweet or very exhausting. Probably both, he said. She did smile then. Small. Real. The door opening again. They sat in her kitchen that evening until 9 o'clock. And somewhere in the middle of it, in the middle of talking about the email and Derek and Carol Hutchins, and the specific architecture of how other people's opinions become internal voices you have to learn to argue against. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. Not the emergency grip from the porch step. Not comfort against crisis. Just her hand in his on the kitchen table because he wanted to hold it, and there was no longer a reason to pretend otherwise. Emily looked down at their hands. She looked up at him. She turned her hand and held his back. Neither of them said anything about it. But when she walked him to the door at 9:15, she said, "Thank you for coming over." And he said, "Thank you for letting me." And both of them meant more than the words contained. 3 days later, Marcus sent an email to the neighborhood block committee. He wrote it once without drafting because the right words came immediately and required no revision. He kept it short. He said that he'd heard about the recent correspondence, that he wanted to be unambiguous about one thing, which was that Emily Carter was someone he respected and cared for deeply, and that any commentary about whether she was appropriate for him was both incorrect and unwelcome. He said he would not be responding further on the subject, and neither should anyone else. He did not consult Emily before sending it. He told her after. She read it, put the phone down. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know. You know people are going to talk more now." "People can do what they want," he said. "I said what was true." She looked at him for a long time. "You said you care for me deeply," she said, carefully, like she was examining the words for accuracy. "Yes," he said, "in a neighborhood email. It's a fact," he said. "Facts can be stated in neighborhood emails." Something shifted in her face. Something came loose. "Marcus," she said. "Emily," he said. A beat. 2. She was the one who moved first. She stepped forward and kissed him, not on the cheek. This time, not the careful glancing thing from the porch step. A real kiss. Brief but real, both hands coming up to his face the way you hold something you've decided to stop being afraid of. She pulled back and looked at him. He looked back. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. Neither of them defined it further. It didn't need defining. Some things are clear in the doing, and what had just happened between them in Emily's kitchen was the clearest thing Marcus Bennett had felt since the world went dark 3 years ago. Lily found out approximately 48 hours later through the infallible intelligence network of an 8-year-old who notices everything adults are trying not to announce. She came downstairs on a Sunday morning, saw Emily at the kitchen counter making French toast, while Marcus sat at the table with the newspaper, and stopped in the doorway, studying the tableau with the focused assessment of a child running data. "Are you two together now?" she asked. Marcus lowered the newspaper. Emily kept her eyes on the pan. "What makes you ask that?" Marcus said. "You're different," Lily said, matter of fact. "You don't look at each other the way you used to. You look at each other the way Mr. and Mrs. Kowalski look at each other, but less old. Emily made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Marcus set the newspaper down. We're figuring some things out, he said. Lily absorbed this. Does figuring things out mean yes? It means we care about each other, Marcus said. And we're being thoughtful. Lily thought about this for approximately 3 seconds. Okay, she said. Can I have extra syrup? No, Marcus said. Emily, Lily said. Don't ask Emily to override me, Marcus said. Emily said nothing, but when she set Lily's plate in front of her, there was notably extra syrup on it. She did not make eye contact with Marcus. Lily ate her French toast with the serenity of a person whose world has just arranged itself into a configuration she finds acceptable. Marcus looked at Emily. Emily looked at her spatula. The corner of her mouth was doing the thing it did. The third week of November was when everything collapsed at once. It started on a Monday morning at 7 a.m., when Marcus's phone rang and the caller ID said, Caldwell and Reed Howard. Howard did not call at 7 a.m. for good reasons. Marcus answered. I need you downtown in an hour, Howard said. The Meridian Tower project. We've got a situation. The situation was this: the lead contractor on the Meridian Tower, a man named Bill Garvey, who had been with the firm for 6 years and managed the site's structural phase, had walked off the job over the weekend, following a dispute with the building owner about change orders. He'd taken his site supervisor with him. The structural phase was 40% complete. The building owner was threatening penalties. The schedule was in danger of collapse. Howard needed Marcus to take over the site management of Meridian, in addition to his existing projects, effective immediately. Marcus sat across from Howard in his office for 20 minutes, listening, asking the right questions, mapping the problem. When Howard was done, Marcus said, Give me today to review the existing documentation. Tomorrow, I'll have an action plan. Howard looked at him the way you look at someone who just confirmed what you already believed. That's why I called you, he said. Marcus spent 12 hours that day at his desk, going through 2 years of Meridian project files, contracts, change order logs, structural specs, communication records between Garvey and the owner. By 6 p.m., he had a clearer picture than Garvey probably had after 6 months, because Marcus read everything and held the pieces in relation to each other until the shape emerged. The problem with Meridian wasn't just that Garvey had left. The problem was that Garvey had been managing the owner poorly for 8 months, letting disputes accumulate instead of addressing them, and the walkout was the inevitable result of a pressure system that had been building without a valve. Marcus called the building owner himself that evening. Directly. No intermediary. He introduced himself, said he was taking over the project management, said he'd reviewed the full file, and said he wanted to understand the owner's perspective on the change orders before forming any conclusions. The owner, a man named Richard Callie, who sounded like he'd been bracing for another argument, went quiet for a moment at that. You actually read the file, Callie said. All of it, Marcus said, including the March email chain that nobody seems to have followed up on. A pause. Garvey never mentioned that email chain, Callie said. I know, Marcus said. Can we talk tomorrow? They talked for 45 minutes the next morning. By the end of it, 3 of the disputed change orders had been resolved in principle. The structural phase was back on schedule by Wednesday. Howard found out through Callie, who called to say that he didn't know who this Marcus Bennett was, but he wanted him on every project going forward. Howard came to Marcus's office Thursday afternoon and stood in the doorway and said, I owe you an apology. Marcus looked up from his desk. For what? For not fighting harder for you in September, Howard said. The certification, the other candidate, I made a resource decision when I should have made a quality decision. He paused. I said that on the phone, but I wanted to say it in person. Marcus held the man's gaze. I appreciate that, he said. You saved this project, Howard said. Not just the schedule, the relationship with Callie. That was going to be a lawsuit in 60 days. It just needed someone to actually listen to him, Marcus said. Howard nodded. That's a skill, he said. Rarer than it sounds. He left. Marcus sat at his desk for a moment, feeling the particular clean satisfaction of work done right. Then he texted Emily. Good day. Tell you tonight. Her response came back in 2 minutes. Lily wants tacos. I said I'd ask. He smiled at his phone. Typed tacos it is. The thing about good weeks, Marcus had learned through experience, was that they had a way of lulling you into forgetting that the ground could still shift. He'd survived enough bad stretches to know that stability was earned daily, not granted. He just didn't expect the shift to come from the direction it did. It came from Emily, on a Friday evening, 2 days after the Howard conversation, after tacos and homework, and Lily's bath, and tucking her in. Marcus came downstairs to find Emily sitting at his kitchen table with both hands around a mug and an expression he hadn't seen before. Not the managed stillness, not the controlled fear, something older and more complicated. What is it? He said. She looked up. Sit down. He sat. I had a call today, she said. From my mother. He waited. My mother and I have a... She paused, selecting words carefully. A complicated history. She lives in Portland. We talk 3 or 4 times a year. She's not unkind. She just has opinions. About everything. Emily's jaw moved slightly. She'd heard I don't know how maybe my sister that I was seeing someone. She called to talk about it. She set the mug down. She asked a lot of questions. About you. Your job, your situation, Lily. A pause. Whether I'd thought carefully about what I was taking on. Marcus was quiet. She used the phrase, Emily said, and her voice had gone careful and flat in a specific way. A man with that much baggage. She looked at Marcus directly. She wasn't trying to be cruel. She was trying to be practical. That's how she does things, practical cruelty. She calls it love. Marcus held her gaze. What did you tell her? He said. Emily looked at her hands. I told her that you weren't baggage, she said. That Lily wasn't baggage. That a man who kept his daughter whole through the worst years of his life while keeping himself together enough to still be good. She stopped. I told her she was describing the wrong thing. Something moved in Marcus's chest. Then she asked, Emily continued more quietly, whether I'd thought about how it would look. To people. Me and... She didn't finish the sentence. And someone like me, Marcus said. Emily looked up. She meant it differently. I know how she meant it. He kept his voice even. She meant your size. What people would assume. Emily pressed her lips together. Yes, she said. The kitchen was quiet. Emily, Marcus said. I know what I look like, she said, and the steadiness in her voice cost her something. I've always known. Derek spent 4 years making sure I never forgot. My mother has spent my whole life being helpfully honest about it. I've done the work, the therapy, the rebuilding. I know my worth isn't located in my body. She met his eyes. And I still sat with that phone call for 6 hours before I could pick myself back up. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, I need to tell you something. She waited. The morning I asked you to drive me to the interview, he said. When I said kiss me for luck, I didn't say it because I was flirting. I said it because for 1 second I forgot to be careful, and what came out was the most honest thing I'd said to you in weeks. He paused. I've been in this kitchen 100 times. I've sat across this table. I've watched you make pie crust with cold butter. I've watched you with Lily. I've watched you on your porch at 10 at night with a book. You're only half reading because you're actually listening for whether I'm okay. He leaned forward. I did not fall in love with an idea of you. I fell in love with you exactly as you are. And if that's not clear enough, I'll say it more specifically more often, and in more neighborhood email chains if necessary. Emily stared at him. You said fall in love, she said. He hadn't planned to say it that precisely. Yes, he said. She was very still. Marcus. I know the timing isn't. Stop, she said. He stopped. She was looking at him with an expression he'd never seen before, not the managed version, not the careful version. The completely unguarded version, which was terrifying and luminous in equal measure. I'm afraid, she said. I know. Not of you, she said. of wanting this much, and I'm afraid of what it would mean to lose it. I'm not going anywhere, he said. You keep saying that. Because I keep meaning it. She pressed both hands flat on the table. I love you too, she said, quietly, directly. No decoration. I've been circling it for months and I'm tired of circling. I love you. I love Lily. I love this. She gestured at the table, the kitchen, the house, the everything of it. I'm afraid and I love you, and apparently those two things can coexist. Marcus reached across the table. She put her hand in his. They sat like that for a long time, not saying more because more wasn't needed. The fear was there. The love was there. Both were real, and neither canceled the other, and that was the most honest thing either of them had managed in years. The following weekend was Thanksgiving. Marcus had planned to go to Denise's, the usual arrangement. Denise's house. Denise's cooking, the comfortable, loud warmth of his sister's family, absorbing him and Lily for a day. He'd mentioned this to Emily weeks ago. Emily had mentioned offhandedly that she usually spent Thanksgiving quietly, that her family was in Portland, and the flights were expensive, and she'd gotten used to the holiday as a solo day. She had not made it sound sad. She was very good at not making things sound sad. Marcus told Denise he was bringing someone. Denise, who had been waiting for this information for approximately the entire fall, said finally, with such force that he held the phone away from his ear. He told Emily on a Tuesday. He sat down across from her at her kitchen table. He was moving back and forth between the houses freely. Now the way you move through spaces that feel like yours, and said, I'd like you to come to Thanksgiving. Emily looked at him. With Lily, she said. With me, he said. And Lily, at my sister's. She knows about you. She's been asking about you for 2 months. What has she been asking? She asked if you were real, Marcus said. Because she said I sounded different when I talked about you, and she'd never heard me sound like that. Emily was quiet. Different how? She said. She said I sounded like myself again, Marcus said. The quiet that followed that sentence was the kind that holds things carefully. Okay, Emily said. Okay. Yes, she said. I'll come. He exhaled. Denise makes enough food for approximately 30 people, he said. Fair warning. I'll bring pie, Emily said. He smiled, she smiled, and Thanksgiving arrived. Denise opened the door, took one look at Emily, and pulled her into a hug before introductions were finished. Emily came out of it slightly startled and completely won over. Denise's husband Ray shook Marcus's hand and said, She's lovely, man, in a low voice that wasn't quite low enough, and Marcus said, I know, without embarrassment. Lily had described Emily to Denise's kids before they arrived. She makes the best pie in the world, and she helped me rescue Gerald, and she's Dad's. At which point she had apparently paused, run the calculation and said, She's Dad's Emily, which everyone in the house had accepted as sufficient. Dad's Emily. Marcus thought about that phrase across the Thanksgiving table, watching Emily talk to Denise with the ease of someone who has found an unexpected compatibility. Watching Lily integrate herself into the chaos of Denise's 3 kids with the adaptability of a child who has learned to make herself at home in different rooms. He thought this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like when the broken pieces find new configurations. Not perfect. Not without cost. Not without the knowledge of everything it had taken to get here. But real. Completely, undeniably real. He was watching Emily laugh at something Denise said. That real laugh. The caught-off-guard one. He'd only heard a handful of times when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it. A text from Dale Pearson, his landlord. He read it under the table. Marcus. Something's come up. Need to talk before the listing goes live. Call me when you get a chance. Could be good news. He stared at the text. Across the table, Emily looked up and caught him reading his phone. She tilted her head slightly. A question without words. He put the phone in his pocket. Later he mouthed. She nodded. Let it go. Turned back to Denise. He sat with it through the rest of dinner, through pie. Emily's pie, which Denise declared was the best thing that had come into her house, including Ray. And Ray agreed with the serenity of a man comfortable with this ranking, through the long, comfortable end of a Thanksgiving that had been everything Marcus hadn't known he needed. He called Dale on the drive home. Lily was asleep in his back seat. Emily was in the passenger seat, her shoes off, turned slightly towards the window in that loose way of someone full of good food and company. He put the phone on speaker low volume. Dale picked up immediately. "Marcus, glad you called." Dale sounded different than he had the last time. Not pained, something else. "Listen, my daughter's surgery, the insurance came through better than expected. The situation is different." A pause. "I know I said I was selling, but if you had any interest in buying the house yourself, I could work with you on the price. Below market. I owe you that much for the timing of all this." Marcus kept his eyes on the road. Emily had turned from the window. She was watching his face. "What number are you thinking?" Marcus said. Dale said the number. Marcus was quiet for a moment. His new salary, the signing bonus that had come through 2 weeks ago, the savings account rebuilt, the math running fast in his head. "I'd need to talk to my bank," Marcus said. "Of course," Dale said. "No pressure, but I wanted you to have the first option." "I'll call you Monday," Marcus said. He hung up. The car was quiet. Emily said, "What was that?" He told her. She listened to every word, and when he was done, she turned and looked at Lily asleep in the back seat, cast free. Now the fracture healed her arm back in full operation, and then looked at Marcus. "The house," she said. "Maybe," he said. "The math might work. I have to run it." "Lily's room," she said. "I know." "The stars," she said. Meaning Rachel's stars, the Lily's sunshine walls, the castle shelf. All the things that had stayed because the house had stayed. "I know," Marcus said. She reached over and put her hand on his arm. Just that. Her hand on his arm, warm and steady, the same way he'd put his hand over hers on the porch step 2 months ago. He drove. The neighborhood came back into the familiar streets, the houses, the specific geography of the life he'd been building without fully knowing it. He pulled into the driveway. Lily woke up the way she always did, all at once, upright, looking around. "Are we home?" she said. "We're home," Marcus said. She looked at Emily. "Are you staying?" "For a little while," Emily. Lily nodded. "Good." She was already opening the car door, already heading for the front door, already done with the conversation. The easy certainty of a child who has decided something is settled. Marcus and Emily stood in the driveway in the November cold. "I'm going to buy the house," he said, not planning out loud, deciding. Emily looked at him. "The math works," he said, "and Lily's stars are in that house." He paused. "And my neighbor is next door. And I'm not moving away from either of those things." Emily stood in the cold with her coat around her and her eyes bright and said, "You're absolutely certain?" "For the first time in 3 years," he said, "Yes, I'm absolutely certain." She held his gaze. Then she reached up and straightened his jacket collar. A small, precise adjustment. The echo of the morning she'd straightened his tie, and then her hands were back at her sides, and she was already turning toward her own house, and Marcus stood in the driveway watching her go, and understanding that the line between his life and hers had become over months and without ceremony, entirely irrelevant. He went inside. He checked on Lily already back in bed, Gerald in hand, asleep in the time it took Marcus to hang up his coat. He stood in the doorway of her room. The stars, the yellow walls, the castle shelf. He said quietly to the room, "We're staying, Rach." He waited. The house was quiet. The good kind. He went downstairs. He called the bank first thing Monday morning. He called Dale back Monday afternoon. The papers were signed before December, and on the morning, the ink dried on the purchase agreement. Marcus Bennett sat at his kitchen table with coffee he'd made himself in the house that was now formally and finally his. And he texted Emily. "One thing. We're staying." Her response came back in 30 seconds, "I know. I never doubted it." He sat with that for a moment. Then he picked up his coffee. Looked at the kitchen, the table, the chairs, the light coming in the way it always did at this hour. All of it familiar. All of it earned. All of it finally his. The papers were signed on a Thursday, And Marcus told nobody except Emily and Denise, because some things deserve a quiet moment before they become a story you tell. Denise cried. She tried not to. She failed, and then she said, "Rachel would be so proud of you." And Marcus held the phone for a moment without answering, because some sentences require space around them. Emily said nothing at all when he texted her. She just showed up at his back door 20 minutes later with a bottle of sparkling cider and 2 glasses, because she knew him well enough to know he wasn't a champagne man, and she poured them both a glass and raised hers and said simply, "To staying." He touched his glass to hers. "To staying," he said. They drank standing in his kitchen, and it was one of the best moments of his life, and it contained nothing dramatic, no music, no grand backdrop, just 2 people in a kitchen at 7 in the evening making a quiet toast to the fact that things had held. December came in fast and cold. Marcus threw himself into the Meridian Tower project with the focused energy of someone who understood now that his work had weight, that it wasn't just income, it was proof. Proof that the version of him he'd been trying to rebuild since Rachel died was not aspirational, but actual. Howard gave him a year-end review in the second week of December and used the word exceptional twice, which Marcus accepted without deflecting, which was itself a form of progress. He enrolled in the PMP certification program the same week. Tuesday and Thursday evenings online, the study materials stacked on the corner of the kitchen table where Lily sometimes did her homework, so they were doing their work in parallel. Lily with her reading log, Marcus with project management frameworks. Both of them occasionally looking up to steal each other's snacks. "What does PMP stand for?" Lily asked one Tuesday. "Project Management Professional," Marcus said. She considered this. "Is that important?" "It means I'm officially good at my job." "You were already good at your job," she said with the simple certainty of someone who has never doubted this. He looked at her for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "I'm starting to believe that." Christmas arrived with the particular intensity of a holiday that had been complicated for 3 years and was this year something else. Denise wanted them all at her house, and Marcus agreed, and Emily came, and Lily wore the green dress she'd picked out herself, and announced at the dinner table that she wanted to be an architect when she grew up, because she'd decided buildings were the most interesting problem. Everyone asked her questions, and she answered all of them with complete authority, and Marcus sat at Denise's table, watching his daughter hold court, and felt the particular specific gratitude of a man who had kept something precious intact through years when it would have been easy to lose it. After dinner, Lily fell asleep on Denise's couch with her cousins piled around her like a litter of puppies. Marcus and Emily sat at the kitchen table with Denise and Ray. The 4 of them talking about nothing important in the way of people entirely comfortable with each other. And at some point, Denise looked at Marcus across the table, with an expression he recognized as the look she'd been giving him his whole life when she was about to say something true. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" he said. "Like yourself," she said. "You look like yourself." He looked at Emily. Emily was looking at her coffee. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I think I finally am." January was when Emily told him about the cafe, not the idea. She'd mentioned it before, in the abstract, the way you mention a dream you're not sure you're allowed to have. But in January on a Sunday afternoon, while Lily was at Cora's house, and they were sitting in Emily's kitchen the way they did most Sundays. Now she pushed a folder across the table and said, "Tell me what you think." He opened it. Inside was a business plan. Handwritten first, then typed, then revised. Floor plan sketches for this commercial space, 2 blocks away, that had been sitting empty for 8 months. The one with the big windows and the kitchen in the back that Emily had mentioned once casually and then never again. He read the whole thing. It took 15 minutes. She sat across from him and didn't speak and refilled his coffee once without asking. When he finished, he looked up. "This is good," he said. "Be honest," she said. "I am honest," he said. "The startup costs are aggressive but defensible. The positioning is right for this neighborhood. Nobody's doing what you're describing, a neighborhood cafe where the food is actually made, not reheated. The community angle is smart." He tapped one page. "This section on community events is undersold. You could make that the entire identity. She was watching him carefully. The bake sales, he said. The school stuff. The way people respond to your food, you already have a customer base. You just haven't charged them yet. He set the folder down. What's stopping you? She was quiet for a moment. Money, she said. And the fact that I've never run a business. The money is solvable, he said. Small business loans, the community development program at First National. I can walk you through the application. And you've been running a household economy on a tight margin for 2 years, which is closer to business management than most people starting out. Marcus. I'm not saying it's easy, he said. I'm saying it's possible. There's a difference. He looked at her directly. Do you want it? She held his gaze. Yes, she said. I've wanted it for 3 years. I've just been afraid, he said. Waiting, she corrected. For something to feel stable enough to risk. He understood that. He'd been living inside that exact calculation for years. Emily, he said, you have been the stable thing for me and Lily since September. It is my actual honor to help you build yours. She looked at him for a long time. Okay, she said. Okay. Help me figure out the loan, she said. He smiled. Monday morning, he said, we make calls. What followed was 4 months of the most productive chaos Marcus had been part of since his early construction days, and this time he was project managing something that mattered in a completely different way. He helped Emily navigate the small business loan process with the same methodical patience he brought to the Meridian Tower. He built her a spreadsheet, a real one with projections and contingency columns that Emily initially found overwhelming and then found indispensable. He went with her to meet the landlord of the empty commercial space and sat beside her at the table and said nothing while she negotiated, because the negotiation was hers to do, and she did it well, coming out with a lease rate 15% below the asking price and 2 months free rent for build-out. She'd done it herself. He'd just been there. Walking out of that meeting, she grabbed his hand in the parking lot and squeezed it hard and said, I can't believe I just did that. I can, he said. She looked at him. I've been able to believe it for a while, he said. She didn't let go of his hand for the rest of the walk to the car. The cafe was called Cornerstone. It was Emily's word arrived at after 2 weeks of naming options that she kept rejecting. Too cute, too generic, too much like every other neighborhood cafe in every other zip code. Cornerstone, she said, because a cornerstone is the piece everything else is built from. Because it's not the flashiest piece, it's the foundational one. Marcus thought it was perfect. Lily thought they should call it Gerald's after the elephant, and this suggestion was received with the affection it deserved. The build-out took 6 weeks. Marcus was on the Meridian project during the days and at the cafe space in the evenings, helping Emily understand what the contractors were doing and which decisions mattered and which ones were the contractor trying to upsell her. He'd held his breath on 2 specific moments. The kitchen ventilation quote, which was padded by about $4,000, and the electrical panel situation, which was the contractor trying to pass a pre-existing issue off as a build-out cost. Both times Marcus caught it. Both times Emily handled the conversation with the contractor herself, with Marcus standing slightly behind her right shoulder, present and silent. She was getting very good at standing her ground. The neighborhood noticed. Not all of it, and not all of it kindly. Carol Hutchins had apparently circulated a second email. This one speculating about the cafe's viability, framed as concern for the neighborhood's commercial character, which Pete reported to Marcus with the same apologetic expression as the first time. Marcus didn't write another email. He told Emily. Emily read about it, set her phone down and said, "Can I borrow your staple gun? I need to hang the permit." Marcus blinked. "The permit," he said. "The business license," she said. "I want to hang it in the window today." He brought her the staple gun. She hung the license in the front window of Cornerstone, visible from the sidewalk, and stood back and looked at it with an expression Marcus had not seen on her face before. It wasn't triumph, too small for that word. It was the expression of someone who has done a thing they didn't know they were capable of, and is in the process of revising their understanding of themselves. "There," she said. "There," he agreed. She turned to him. What ye, nothing," he said. You just look... What? I thought about the right word. Found it. Unafraid, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she kissed him in the front window of her cafe, visible from the sidewalk, business license hanging beside them, staple gun still in Marcus's hand. She kissed him the way she'd kissed him in her kitchen months ago, real and clear and unhedged, and he kissed her back with everything he had. When she pulled back, she said, "Carol Hutchins might be watching." "Good," Marcus said. She laughed. The full one. The caught-off-guard one he'd been collecting since September. Cornerstone opened on a Saturday in April. Emily had invited the neighborhood Lily's school community. Denise and Ray and their kids, 3 women from the church 2 streets over, who had been her first consistent baking customers, and approximately 40 other people who had encountered Emily's food at some point and remembered it. By 10:30 in the morning, every table was full. By noon, the first batch of lemon bars was gone, and Emily was in the kitchen making a second batch from memory, while 2 of the church women she'd hired as part-time staff managed the front, and Marcus was at a corner table working through PMP materials, because he'd told Howard he was sitting the exam in June, and he meant it, and Lily was at the counter eating a snickerdoodle with the proprietary pleasure of someone at a family establishment. Marcus looked up from his notes and watched Emily come out of the kitchen with a tray of something new, a brown butter apple tart she'd been developing for 3 weeks, and set it on the counter and call out to the room that she was doing a tasting, and the room turned to her, and she stood there behind her counter in her own cafe that she had built and negotiated and licensed and opened, and she was not small. Not anywhere in her body or her bearing or her eyes. She was enormous, in the best possible sense. She filled the room. Marcus sat with that for a moment. Then he looked back at his notes. The exam could wait 10 more minutes. He was watching something more important. Summer arrived, and Cornerstone found its rhythm. Not without difficulty, a supplier issue in May, a staff scheduling problem in June that Emily solved by hiring a second part-time person and adjusting her own hours a week in July, when the espresso machine required a repair that cost more than Emily had budgeted and less than she'd feared. Real problems. Business problems. The kind that require solving, not surviving. Emily solved them. She called Marcus when she needed a second perspective. She called her small business mentor at First National when she needed financial guidance. She called Denise unexpectedly when she needed to talk to someone who was outside it all and could tell her whether she was being reasonable, and Denise delivered direct judgment with love, which Emily said was the most useful thing she'd been given in years. She was building a life, her own full 3-dimensional life, and it was happening right next door to Marcus's, and the 2 of them had stopped negotiating the distance between those lives and just moved through them together openly, without apology. Marcus passed the PMP exam on a Tuesday in June. He called Emily from the parking lot of the testing center before he called anyone else. She picked up on the second ring. "Well," she said. "I passed," he said. She made a sound he'd never heard from her before. A sharp, full, completely unmanaged exclamation of joy, not composed, not measured, just real, pure, unguarded happiness on his behalf. "Emily," he said. "Sorry," she said, clearly not sorry. "I'm just Marcus. I'm so—" "I know," he said. "Get home," she said. "We're celebrating." "What kind of celebrating?" "The kind with pie," she said. "And Lily." "That's my favorite kind," he said. The town's annual community festival happened in August. Callaway Street participated every year. The block committee organized a stretch of booths and activities. Cornerstone had a table. The church had a table. Various neighbors contributed various things. Marcus had been to the festival twice before, in low-key ways, the kind of attendance where you show up, walk around, say hello to people, and leave after an hour. This year was different. This year, he'd helped Emily set up the Cornerstone booth at 6 in the morning, which meant arriving with the tables and the display equipment and the first trays of baked goods that Emily had prepared the day before and stored overnight. Lily was with them because she'd begged, and she was in the Cornerstone apron Emily had made for her navy blue, her name embroidered on the chest, and she was taking this responsibility with the solemnity of a small person entrusted with something real. The festival ran from 10 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. By noon, the Cornerstone booth had a line. By 1:30, the lemon bars were completely gone, and Emily was directing Lily to put up the sold-out sign that they'd apparently prepared in advance because Emily prepared for things. Marcus was at the edge of the booth restocking napkins when Pete appeared at his shoulder with a coffee and the expression of a man delivering good news. "Carol's not here this year," Pete said. Marcus glanced at him. "What?" "She moved," Pete said. "2 weeks ago. Phoenix." He paused. "I probably should have told you. I'm telling you now." Marcus looked at him for a moment. "Okay," he said. "That's it," Pete said. "Just okay. What do you want me to say?" "I don't know," Pete said. "I thought you'd have a reaction." "The reaction is okay," Marcus said. "She was a footnote. The story was always something else." Pete considered this. "That's very mature. I have a PMP now," Marcus said. "It matures you." Pete laughed. Marcus went back to work. At 3 in the afternoon, the booth had slowed enough that Emily came around the counter and stood beside Marcus and let herself exhale for the first time all day. Her hair was slightly loose, there was a dusting of powdered sugar on her left forearm, and she was smiling with the full relaxed pleasure of someone who has done exactly what she set out to do. "Good day," she said. "Great day," he said. "We sold everything," she said. "I brought more than last year, and we sold everything." "I know," he said. "I was here." She bumped her shoulder against his lightly. Lily appeared from behind the table with the empty sold-out sign and announced with the gravity of an official report. Gerald would have been very proud of this. "Gerald would have wanted free samples," Emily said. "Gerald would have gotten free samples," Lily said firmly. "Because he's family." She went back behind the table. Marcus and Emily stood side by side. She said, "Gerald is family," Emily said. "I heard," Marcus said. Emily was quiet for a moment. "She's not wrong," Emily said softly. "She never is," Marcus said. The crowd moved around them, the festival doing its ordinary late afternoon thing, the sun getting lower and warmer. Marcus looked at the booth. Emily's booth with Emily's sign, and Emily's apron on Lily, and the empty trays that had been full at 6 this morning, and felt the specific particular weight of everything that had brought them to this afternoon. He thought about September, the grease on his hands, the truck that wouldn't start, the interview he wasn't sure he deserved, the woman who drove him downtown and straightened his tie and handed him back to himself. He thought about "Kiss Me for Luck." He thought about "How much more do you need?" He reached into his jacket pocket. He'd been carrying it for 3 weeks. He'd bought it on a Tuesday alone in a small jewelry shop downtown after 20 minutes of standing at the counter, knowing exactly what he wanted, and taking his time anyway, because some decisions deserve to be made slowly, even when you've already made them. He'd told nobody. Not Denise, not Pete, not even Lily, which was its own small miracle. "Emily," he said. She turned. I was already turning to face her, already reaching for her hand, and she looked at his face, and something shifted in hers. Immediate reading him, the way she'd always read him, the way she'd known from the overhead light at 3 in the morning, whether he was worried or just restless. She knew. Her breath caught. "Marcus." "I'm not doing a speech," he said. "You know I'm not good at speeches." "You're good at saying true things," she said. "Then here's a true thing," he said. He opened his hand. The ring was simple, a gold band with a small diamond. Nothing enormous, nothing performative. The kind of ring a man buys when he wants it to be about the person, not the jewelry. "I spent 3 years thinking the best part of my life was already behind me. And then I spent a year watching you sit on a porch step and make pie and straighten things that were crooked and believe in people who were still figuring out whether they deserved it." He held her gaze. "You are the best person I know. You have been from the beginning. I just needed time to stop being afraid of knowing it." Emily was not crying. She was very close. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were bright, and she was looking at him with the completely open, completely unguarded face that she only showed in the moments when the armor was entirely down. "I love you," he said. "Not the idea of you. Not the version of you that's convenient or comfortable. You." The one who says what's true and bakes when she's scared and holds her ground in leases and taught my daughter that lumps are what make the crust work. He paused. Will you marry me? The festival moved around them. Music from somewhere across the field. The sound of the crowd and the late August afternoon and all the ordinary things the world does while something extraordinary happens inside it. Emily looked at the ring. She looked at him. Yes, she said. Not decorated, not performed. Just yes, clean and complete. And she held out her left hand steady, and he put the ring on it, and she looked at it for a moment, and then she looked at him, and she said it again, quieter. Yes. He cupped her face in both hands, those same hands that had been grease-stained on a September morning when everything started, and kissed her right there at the Cornerstone booth in the middle of the community festival in front of everyone on Callaway Street and beyond. From somewhere behind the table, a small voice said, I knew it. Lily. They broke apart. Lily was standing on the back of the booth's display step, with both fists raised, Cornerstone apron flapping, looking like the most satisfied person at the entire festival. You knew, Marcus said. I found the box in your sock drawer 3 weeks ago, Lily announced. Emily laughed, the full one, the real one, the caught-off-guard one. You didn't say anything, Marcus said. You looked nervous, Lily said. I thought it was good for you. She jumped off the step and ran around the table and threw her arms around both of them at the same time, purple cast, long gone, both arms free. Can we have pie now? We're at a pie booth, Emily said, still laughing. I know, Lily said. I've been very patient. They ate pie at the Cornerstone table in the August afternoon. The three of them, Marcus and Emily and Lily, with the empty trays and the sold-out sign and the ring on Emily's finger, catching the light, and the crowd moved around them, and the festival did its ordinary thing, and it was the most completely, irreversibly happy Marcus Bennett had been since the world went sideways on him. I thought about Rachel. He thought about her the way he always thought about her now, not with the sharp grief of the first years, but with the settled, permanent love of a man who carries someone with him rather than behind him. I thought she would have liked Emily. He thought she would have laughed at the sock drawer. He thought she would have loved the look on Lily's face right now. I thought you kept her whole, and now she's teaching someone else how to be whole. And that is not an ending. That is what love does when it's the real kind. It keeps going. It finds new shapes. It doesn't diminish what came before. It honors it by refusing to stop. 2 years later, Cornerstone was the kind of neighborhood institution that people brought out-of-town visitors to, that showed up in local magazine lists, that had a regular morning crowd who knew each other by name, and the kind of afternoon crowd who came for the quiet and stayed for the pie. Emily had hired 3 full-time staff. She was developing a second location. She'd been asked to speak at a small business conference in the city, and had said yes without asking anyone's permission, and Marcus had sat in the second row of that conference room and watched her stand at a podium and talk about building something real, and felt pride so complete it was almost physical. Marcus had been senior project manager at Caldwell and Reed for 2 years. The PMP was on his office wall. The Meridian Tower had been completed 6 months ahead of revised schedule, which had become, according to Howard, a case study the firm used in business development presentations. Howard had offered Marcus a partnership track conversation in the spring, which Marcus had accepted with the calm of a man who knows the difference between what he used to want and what he has built. Lily was 10 and in 5th grade, and had recently revised her career plan from architect to engineer, specifically structural, because she'd decided that architects got too much credit and engineers did the actual work, a position she had explained to Marcus and Emily at dinner, with the systematic logic of someone who had thought it through completely. They had gotten married in October, a year after the festival. Small Specific held in Denise's backyard on a Saturday afternoon with 40 people who actually mattered, and Emily's lemon bars at the reception table, and Gerald the elephant in a small bow tie that Lily had fashioned herself. Denise had cried. Ray had shaken Marcus's hand and said, "Good man," which was the entirety of Ray's emotional vocabulary, and the most he meant by anything. Emily's sister had come from Portland. Emily's mother had come from Portland, and she had sat across from Marcus at dinner and talked to him for an hour, and at the end she said, "I was wrong, without decoration," and Marcus said, I appreciate you saying so. And that was the entirety of what needed to be said. Emily wore a dress she'd found herself deep green that she described as the first piece of clothing in 10 years she'd chosen, without wondering whether it would make her look smaller. She did not look smaller. She looked like herself. Exactly and completely and unapologetically herself. She was the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen. He told her so. She said, "You're biased." He said, "Completely. Doesn't make it less true." On a Saturday in September, 2 years and 1 week after the morning with the grease and the truck and the interview that started everything. Marcus was in the garage of their house now, legally and permanently theirs, working on the custom woodworking project he'd started in the spring. A bookshelf commission, a set of built-in shelves for a client who'd found him through a neighbor who'd found him through the cabinet he'd made for Emily's cafe. Word of mouth, the slow, legitimate kind. I wasn't running a full business yet. He had the Caldwell and Reed career, the mortgage, the certification, the life. But he had the woodworking too for the mornings and the weekends, the physical counterweight to the desk work, the part of him that needed to make something tangible and hold it, and know it was well made. He was sanding a shelf when Emily appeared in the garage doorway. She was holding 2 coffees. She was wearing a sweater he'd seen 100 times. She had flour on her left forearm, same place she always got it. She handed him a coffee. He took it. "Lily wants to know if you're almost done," Emily said. "For the shelves." "For today," Emily said. "She wants to go to the farmer's market. She has a plan involving $6 and her specific opinions about which jam is the best jam." "That child has too many opinions," Marcus said. "She gets it from someone," Emily said. He looked at her. "Not me," Emily said too quickly. He smiled. She smiled back. That real one, the one that lived at the corner of her mouth and had started over 2 years to arrive faster, as if the door that had once been closed for so long had learned to open at the first knock. He set down the sandpaper, looked at the shelf, looked at her. "Hey," he said. She tilted her head. "I think I still need a lucky kiss," he said. She looked at him. A beat. 2. And then the smile widened, the full one, the real one, the one he would never stop wanting to see, and she stepped forward and wrapped both arms around him, sawdust and coffee and flour and all of it, and said against his shoulder, "After everything we've been through, Marcus Bennett, I think you deserve as many as you want." He held on. She held on. Outside, Lily called from the back door with news about the jam situation that she felt was urgent. Inside the garage, 2 people who had been broken in different ways held on to each other in the ordinary. Saturday morning light, and the house stood around them, solid and earned, and the life they had built from a grease-stained joke on a September morning, and 2 people who didn't know yet that they were exactly what the other one needed was real and warm and completely permanently theirs. Some love stories begin with perfection. This one began with a broken truck, a borrowed car, a crooked tie, and a woman who said yes before she was asked and meant it before she was ready and stayed when it would have been easier to leave. That is not a small thing. That is the whole thing. That is everything.